Most werewolf stories begin with fated mates recognizing each other under a full moon, their wolves howling in perfect harmony as destiny clicks into place. But Juliet Hale's story began with a business proposition delivered in a marble conference room, surrounded by lawyers and witnesses, where the most powerful alpha in the Western Territories offered her everything she'd ever wanted except his heart. Not a fairy tale blessing, but a calculated arrangement. For $300,000 and 1 year of her life, she would pretend to be his chosen mate. This is the story of what she sacrificed for her family, and what she discovered she could never pretend about. The contradiction lived in every fiber of her being. She was about to become a queen without a kingdom, a mate without a bond, a wife to a man who would never truly see her. Alpha King Kieran Blackthorne needed a fake Luna to secure his throne against council challenges. Juliet needed money to save her brother's life. The transaction was simple, clinical, devoid of the magic that should accompany a mating bond. Sign here, initial there, smile for the cameras, play the part for 12 months, then disappear back into obscurity with enough money to pay for Finn's experimental treatment, and maybe, just maybe, a future where her little brother could actually have one. She'd known about Kieran Blackthorne for years. Everyone in the werewolf territories knew about him. The ruthless Alpha King who'd unified 3 warring packs before his 25th birthday. The warrior who'd killed his own father to stop a tyrant's reign. The leader whose ice-blue eyes could freeze a wolf mid-shift with nothing but a glance. She'd seen him once, 4 years ago, at the Northern Summit where her father had served as a low-ranking guard. Kieran had walked past her without a flicker of recognition, his attention fixed on matters of state and strategy, while something in her chest had lurched sideways, her wolf whimpering with a recognition she'd immediately suppressed. He was the king. She was nobody. That's how the story should have ended. But now she sat across from him in his private study, the contract between them, her hand trembling as she held the pen. His expression revealed nothing carved from granite and winter storms, beautiful in the way dangerous things are beautiful. He hadn't smiled once during the negotiations, hadn't pretended this was anything other than what it was. A mutually beneficial arrangement between 2 people who needed something from each other. "My only condition," he said, his voice like whiskey and smoke, "is that you never fall in love with me." Juliet's breath caught. Of all the clauses in the 60-page contract, the public appearances, the shared quarters, the physical affection required to sell the charade, this one wasn't written in legal language. This was personal. A warning. A boundary drawn in blood. "Never?" she whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. "Never." His ice-blue eyes met hers, and for a moment, she saw something flicker there. Pain, maybe. Or the ghost of it. "I cannot give you what you'd need. I won't. This is a performance, Miss Hale. 1 year of pretending. If you develop feelings, the arrangement ends immediately, and the money stops. Do you understand?" She understood. She understood that the most powerful alpha in the Western Territories was so broken inside that he'd rather pay someone to fake a bond than risk a real one. She understood that whatever had happened to him, and rumors swirled like autumn leaves about a dead mate. A betrayal. A heart carved out and buried with someone whose name was never spoken had turned him into this. A man who could negotiate a marriage like a corporate merger. She also understood that $300,000 would save Finn's life, and she would walk through fire for her baby brother. She would pretend to love a man who explicitly forbade her from actually loving him. She would smile and play Luna and warm his bed and wear his mark, a fake mark, created by magic rather than a true claiming bite, and when the year ended, she would walk away. How hard could it be? She'd spent 24 years being invisible. She could spend 1 more being seen by everyone except the one person whose gaze she'd craved since that day 4 years ago when he'd walked past her like she didn't exist. "I understand, Your Majesty," Juliet said, straightening her spine. 1 year, no feelings, just pretend. Something flickered across his face, approval or regret, she couldn't tell. "Then we have an accord." She signed the contract, he signed below her, witnesses notarized, lawyers collected papers. And just like that, Juliet Hale became someone else. Luna-elect of the Blackthorne Pack, future queen of the Western Territories, and the greatest actress in werewolf history. Because the truth she could never tell him, the secret that made his one condition an impossible cruelty, was this. She'd been a little bit in love with Kieran Blackthorne since the moment she'd first seen him 4 years ago. And now she had exactly 12 months to pretend she wasn't while living as his wife, sharing his space, playing his mate, and somehow protecting her heart from a man who'd explicitly forbidden her from giving it to him. The clock started ticking the moment the ink dried. 1 year, $300,000, one impossible condition, and a love she could never, ever admit existed. Chapter 1. The Hidden Truth. The Blackthorn estate sprawled across 200 acres of ancient forest. Its main residence, a fortress disguised as a mansion. Juliet stood in the circular driveway, her single battered suitcase at her feet, staring up at the stone columns and floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the late afternoon sun like sheets of gold. Somewhere inside that architectural masterpiece, Kieran Blackthorn was probably reviewing strategy reports, or signing execution orders, or doing whatever terrifyingly competent things Alphakings did with their time. And tonight, she would sleep under the same roof. Her wolf paced anxiously beneath her skin, confused by the fake mate mark that now decorated Juliet's left shoulder, a perfect replica of a claiming bite, created by the pack's most skilled enchantress. It looked real, even smelled faintly of Kieran's cedar wood and winter storm scent, but it lacked the soul-deep connection of an actual bond. Her wolf knew the difference, kept searching for the thread that should connect them to their mate but finding only empty air. "Not our mate," Juliet reminded her wolf firmly. "Just pretend." "Miss Hale." A woman emerged from the massive front doors, her silver hair pulled into an immaculate bun, her posture radiating efficient authority. "I'm Eleanor, head of household staff. His Majesty is currently in meetings but has asked me to show you to your quarters. Please, follow me." Juliet grabbed her suitcase, ignoring Eleanor's slight wince at the duct tape holding one corner together. The contrast between her worn luggage and the marble foyer they entered couldn't be more pronounced, like dragging poverty through the gates of power and hoping nobody noticed the stains. The interior of the estate was somehow more intimidating than the exterior. Vaulted ceilings stretched 3 stories high. A double staircase curved upward like angel wings. Art that probably cost more than Juliet's childhood home decorated every wall. The scent of power saturated everything: old magic, older money, and the unmistakable musk of a dominant alpha's territory. "The king's quarters occupy the entire 3rd floor west wing," Eleanor explained as they climbed the right side staircase, her heels clicking against marble. "You'll have access to his private study, bedroom, sitting room, and the terrace. The bedroom has an en-suite bathroom with a soaking tub, separate shower, and—" "Wait." Juliet stopped mid-step. "His bedroom?" Eleanor's expression remained professionally neutral, but something flickered in her eyes: pity, maybe, or understanding. "You're his intended mate, Miss Hale. Where else would you sleep?" "Right. Because fake mates still had to sell the illusion to everyone, including the household staff." Juliet's stomach twisted. The contract had mentioned shared quarters, in that clinical legal language, but somehow she'd convinced herself that meant separate rooms connected by a door she could lock. Not sharing an actual bed with a man who'd made it explicitly clear he wanted nothing real between them. "Of course," Juliet managed, forcing her feet to continue climbing. "I just thought—" "Never mind." They reached the 3rd floor, where the hallway opened into a private corridor with only 2 doors. Eleanor pushed open the one on the left, revealing a space that could have housed Juliet's entire family with room to spare. The sitting room alone was larger than the apartment she'd grown up in: leather furniture arranged around a stone fireplace, bookshelves filled with what looked like first editions, windows offering a view of endless forest. "Bedrooms through there." Eleanor indicated a doorway to the right. "His Majesty typically retires around midnight and rises at 5. He takes his coffee black, no sugar. Breakfast is served in the private dining room at 6, though he often works through meals. You're welcome to eat with the staff if you prefer, but—" She trailed off delicately. "But it wouldn't look right for the future Luna to eat in the kitchens," Juliet finished. "Precisely." Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "This must be overwhelming. If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask. We're here to help you succeed in your new role." Your new role. As if being queen was a part in a play, which Juliet supposed it was. At least for her. After Eleanor left, Juliet stood alone in the sitting room, her suitcase still clutched in one white-knuckled hand. Through the doorway, She could see a massive 4-poster bed dressed in dark blue linens. The kind of bed made for an alpha's size and strength. Her throat went dry. She forced herself to move, to unpack her meager belongings into a walk-in closet that mocked her 3 pairs of jeans and handful of threadbare sweaters. Someone had already filled half the closet with new clothes designer labels. Luna-appropriate dresses. Shoes that probably cost more than she'd made in the last 6 months combined. Tags still attached. Sizes, perfect. As if Kieran, or more likely, Eleanor, had assessed her measurements and ordered an entire wardrobe without bothering to ask what she actually liked. Because it didn't matter what she liked. She was a prop in his performance. Juliet was hanging up her last shirt when her phone buzzed. Finn's name lit the screen, and her heart lurched sideways with the guilty relief of remembering why she was here. "Hey, troublemaker," she answered, injecting false brightness into her voice. "How was physical therapy?" "Brutal." Her brother's voice came through thin and tired, so different from the energetic 12-year-old he'd been before the diagnosis. "But Dr. Rivera says if we can get me into that clinical trial in Germany, my numbers might actually improve. Isn't that wild? Like actual improvement, not just slowing the decline." Juliet's eyes burned. "That's amazing, Finn." "Yeah, well, it's expensive as hell. The treatment alone is like 200,000, plus travel, plus." He stopped abruptly. "Sorry, I shouldn't dump this on you. I know you're already doing everything you can with the extra shifts at the diner." She looked around the luxury suite, at the bed she'd share with a king, at the fake mark on her shoulder that would let her brother live. "Don't worry about the money. I've got it handled." "Juliet, you can't possibly." "I've got it handled," she repeated firmly. "You just focus on getting stronger, okay? I'll take care of everything else." They talked for a few more minutes about nothing important, his favorite nurse, a funny thing that happened with his roommate, whether the hospital food could legally be classified as actual food. Normal sibling conversation that felt like a lifeline back to who she really was, before she'd signed a contract selling a year of her life to a man who didn't want her. After she hung up, Juliet sat on the edge of that massive bed and let herself feel it. The weight of what she'd agreed to, the impossibility of the condition Kieran had set, the fear that she'd already broken the cardinal rule by caring about him long before she'd ever met him properly. Never fall in love with me. Too late, she thought. 4 years too late. A door opened somewhere in the suite. Footsteps approached, confident, measured, unmistakably masculine. Juliet shot to her feet just as Kieran Blackthorne appeared in the bedroom doorway, still wearing the charcoal suit from their meeting, though he'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves. The casual gesture somehow made him more dangerous, not less, exposing forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars that told stories of violence survived. His ice blue eyes swept over her, taking in her position on his bed, her phone still clutched in one hand. Something flickered in his expression too fast to read, gone before she could interpret it. "You're settled," he observed. "Not a question." "Yes, Your Majesty." "Kieran." He moved further into the room, and Juliet's wolf immediately responded to the proximity of such raw dominance, wanting to submit, to expose her throat, to do any of the 1,000 instinctive things wolves did around their alphas. "When we're alone, you call me Kieran. In public, my love, or darling, or whatever endearment feels natural. We need to sell this, Juliet. The council is already suspicious about the timing of our courtship." "Right. Because they'd announced their engagement exactly 2 weeks after meeting, which would seem rushed even by werewolf standards where mates often bonded quickly. The official story was love at first sight, a recognition so powerful they couldn't wait. The truth was a signed contract and 300,000 reasons to lie convincingly. "I understand," Juliet said. "Kieran." His name felt strange on her tongue, too intimate, too presumptuous. Like calling the sun by its first name. He studied her for a long moment, and Juliet fought the urge to fidget under that penetrating stare. Finally, he moved to the dresser and began emptying his pockets, wallet, keys, phone, a wicked-looking blade that he handled with practiced ease. "We have dinner with the council tomorrow night," he said, not looking at her. "First public appearance as an engaged couple. Eleanor will help you prepare. There's protocol to learn, names to memorize, dynamics to understand. The Western Council doesn't accept outsiders easily, especially not ones elevated to Luna without the traditional trials. What kind of trials? Juliet asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Combat, usually. Strategy tests, demonstrations of dominance, and pack management skills. He finally turned to face her, and something almost like amusement ghosted across his features. We're skipping all that because I'm the Alpha King and I can do whatever the hell I want. They'll resent you for it. Wonderful, Juliet muttered. So they'll hate me on sight. They'll try to break you. Kieran's voice went cold. They'll test you, insult you, look for any weakness they can exploit, and if they sense that this bond isn't real. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Then what? Juliet heard herself ask. What happens if they figure out we're faking? Kieran's jaw tightened. The council can challenge my right to rule if they believe I've been compromised. There are factions who'd love an excuse to remove me from power. Elder wolves who think I'm too young, too ruthless, too willing to change traditions they consider sacred. He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried an edge that made her wolf whimper. If they discover this arrangement, they'll tear you apart to get to me. Politically, socially, and if necessary, physically. Ice slid down Juliet's spine. You didn't mention that in the contract. Would it have changed your answer? She thought of Finn in that hospital bed, his body slowly shutting down, his brilliant mind trapped in a failing vessel. Thought of the impossible cost of the German trial, and the desperate hope in his voice when he'd talked about actual improvement. No, she admitted quietly. It wouldn't have. Something shifted in Kieran's expression, a crack in the ice, quickly frozen over again. He nodded once, sharp and final. Good. Then we understand each other. For the next year, you are mine in every way that matters publicly. You'll wear my mark, carry my scent, stand at my right hand as Luna. You'll smile when I touch you, lean into me when we're watched, and make every wolf in this territory believe that I'm so obsessed with you I can barely think straight. His words should have sounded clinical, like instructions for a role. Instead, they landed like promises, dangerous ones that made heat pool low in her stomach despite knowing better. And privately? Juliet asked, proud that her voice stayed steady. Privately, we maintain appropriate distance. Separate sides of the bed, separate lives within these walls. I won't touch you beyond what's necessary for the performance. He held her gaze, ice blue eyes as hard as winter. And you will honor the condition we agreed upon. No feelings, Juliet. No matter what happens, no matter how convincing we have to be in public, you will not fall in love with me. Are we clear? She should have agreed immediately. Should have nodded and accepted the boundary and been grateful he was drawing such clear lines. Instead, something reckless rose in her chest, maybe her wolf's frustration, maybe her own perverse need to push back against a man who thought he could control emotions with contracts and conditions. What if I can't help it? The question escaped before she could stop it. What if pretending turns into something real? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Kieran closed the distance between them in 2 strides, suddenly towering over her, his alpha dominance rolling off him in waves that made every instinct scream at her to submit. His hand came up, and for a wild second, she thought he might touch her face, but he stopped inches away, his fingers curling into a fist. Then you'll learn to help it. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of an alpha command. Because I'm not capable of loving you back, Juliet. Whatever you think you see in me, whatever fantasies you might build about this arrangement becoming real, destroy them now. I'm not a good man. I'm not a hero. I'm a king who'll do whatever necessary to protect his throne, including using you as a shield against my enemies. I know what you are, Juliet said. And she did. She'd heard the stories, seen the cold calculation in his eyes, understood exactly what kind of ruthless leader he'd had to become. I signed the contract anyway. Then don't forget what you signed. He stepped back, that brief moment of intensity shuddered behind Arctic control. I have work to finish tonight. The bed is large enough for both of us to keep appropriate distance. I'll take the left side. You can have the right. I don't snore, and I wake early. Try not to be startled when you hear me leave for training at 5. With that stunning demonstration of romantic compatibility, he turned and walked back into the sitting room, already pulling out his phone and scrolling through messages, as if their entire conversation had been nothing more than crossing another item off his endless to-do list. Juliet stood alone in their bedroom now, for the next 12 months, and wondered what the hell she'd gotten herself into. The fake mark on her shoulder burned like accusation. Through the open doorway, she could see Kieran settling into one of the leather chairs, his face illuminated by laptop light, already absorbed in whatever crisis demanded his attention. He looked untouchable. Unreachable. Exactly like the man who'd walked past her 4 years ago without seeing her at all. Except now she'd sold him a year of her life with one impossible condition attached. Don't fall in love with a man who'd forbidden her from loving him, who'd made it clear he'd never love her back, who'd warned her in the coldest possible terms that this was business and nothing more. Juliet looked at the massive bed they'd share while maintaining appropriate distance. Thought about the council dinner tomorrow where she'd have to convince a room full of hostile wolves that she belonged at. Kieran sighed, remembered Finn's voice talking about clinical trials and actual improvement and hope. She could do this. She'd survived worse. She was strong enough to pretend for 12 months. To play Luna to Kieran's king. To share his bed without sharing his heart. And if sometimes, in the darkest hours before dawn, her wolf whimpered with longing for a bond that would never be real, well, that was her secret to keep. Just like the truth that she'd been halfway in love with him since the moment she'd first seen him. Some secrets were meant to stay buried, even if they destroyed you in the keeping. Chapter 2. Dangerous Proximity. Juliet woke to darkness and the sound of controlled breathing. For a disoriented moment, she forgot where she was. The bed too soft. The sheets too expensive. The room too large. Then awareness crashed back. Blackthorn Estate. Fake engagement. Alphaking sleeping 3 feet away on the other side of a bed big enough to park a car in. She held perfectly still, her own breathing shallow, hyper-aware of Kieran's presence in a way that made her wolf sit up and take notice. Even in sleep, he radiated power. She could feel it like heat, like gravity, pulling at something deep in her chest. The clock on the nightstand read 4:47 a.m. 13 minutes until he'd wake for training. Juliet closed her eyes and tried to convince herself she was still asleep. When she heard him move, a rustle of sheets, weight shifting. Then his feet hitting the floor with barely a sound. Through her lashes, she watched his silhouette cross to the closet, moving with the fluid grace of a predator even half awake. He emerged minutes later in training gear that showed off a physique built for violence. Without glancing at the bed, he left the suite. Only after the door clicked shut did Juliet release the breath she'd been holding. She'd shared a bed with the Alphaking and survived the night without embarrassing herself. Small victories. The clock now read 5:02 a.m. Too early to get up, too wired to fall back asleep. She lay there watching dawn creep across the ceiling, thinking about Finn, about the council dinner tonight, about how Kieran had looked at her last night when he'd said, "I'm not capable of loving you back with such absolute certainty." What had happened to him? The rumors were endless, but contradictory. A mate who'd died, a mate who'd betrayed him, a mate who'd never existed. Some said he'd loved someone so deeply her loss had broken something fundamental inside him. Others claimed he'd been born with ice where his heart should be, that he'd never been capable of the softer emotions. Juliet suspected the truth was worse than either version. At 7 a.m., Eleanor knocked and entered with the efficiency of someone who'd perfected the art of managing powerful men. "Good morning, Miss Hale. His Majesty is in the shower. I've brought breakfast and your schedule for today." She set down a tray with coffee, fruit, and pastries that smelled like heaven, then produced a leather portfolio. "You have 3 hours with our protocol instructor starting at 9, followed by lunch with the ladies' auxiliary at noon. They're eager to meet the future Luna. At 3 you'll need to select your attire for tonight's dinner, and Eleanor will help with styling. The car leaves for Council Hall at 7 sharp. Juliet's stomach twisted. The ladies' auxiliary? Wives and mates of senior pack members. There. Eleanor chose her words carefully. Traditional. Conservative. They'll want to assess whether you're suitable for the Luna position. You mean they'll want to tear me apart? Eleanor's lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. I wouldn't phrase it quite that way. But yes. Be prepared for pointed questions about your background, your bloodline, and your intentions toward His Majesty. Answer honestly but reveal nothing you wouldn't want repeated. Everything you say will be analyzed and reported back to their mates. Perfect. Trial by gossip before she'd even had coffee. The shower turned off. Moments later, Kieran emerged in a towel, his dark hair wet, his chest still damp. Juliet's brain short-circuited. She'd known abstractly that he was built like a warrior. You didn't unify 3 warring packs through diplomacy alone, but seeing it was different. Scars decorated his torso like a map of violence survived. Muscle moved under tanned skin with predatory grace. He noticed her staring and raised an eyebrow. Problem? No, Juliet managed, looking very intently at her coffee. Just didn't expect you to. Walk around half naked in my own bedroom? He moved to the closet, completely unself-conscious. We're supposed to be mates, Juliet. Mates see each other naked. You'll need to get comfortable with it, or people will notice your discomfort. He was right, damn him. Real mates wouldn't flinch at casual nudity. Real mates would probably find excuses to touch, to admire, to stop. That thinking. Kieran emerged fully dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her father's monthly salary, looking every inch the Alpha King who could command armies with a gesture. He poured himself coffee, black as promised, and drank it standing by the window. How did you sleep? He asked, without looking at her. Fine. A lie. She'd been painfully aware of him all night. His breathing, his warmth, the 3 feet of space between them that felt simultaneously too much and not enough. Good. You'll need your energy for today. He finally turned, ice blue eyes assessing. The ladies' auxiliary will be your first real test. They'll try to intimidate you, make you feel inferior, push you to react emotionally. Don't give them the satisfaction. Stay calm, stay pleasant, and remember you're going to be their Luna, whether they like it or not. Any other advice? Juliet asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Yes. He set down his coffee cup. Come here. She froze. What? I said, come here. Not quite an alpha command, but close enough to make her wolf respond instinctively. Juliet stood and crossed to him, stopping just outside his personal space. Kieran studied her for a long moment, then reached out and adjusted the collar of her sleep shirt, a threadbare thing she'd owned since college. His fingers brushed her collarbone, and electricity arced through her body at the contact. You can't wear things like this anymore, he said quietly. Everything you own, everything you wear, everything you do, reflects on me now. Eleanor's having a proper wardrobe delivered today. Use it. Anger flared hot in her chest. There's nothing wrong with my clothes. There's everything wrong with them. His voice stayed level, factual. You're not Juliet Hale, struggling waitress, anymore. You're Juliet Hale, future Luna Queen of the Western Territories. Those are 2 different people, and you need to become the second one convincingly. That means new clothes, new bearing, new everything. You want me to pretend I'm someone else. I want you to become someone else. His hand dropped away. The girl who wore that shirt doesn't belong here. The woman who stands at my side does. Figure out the difference, or the ladies' auxiliary will eat you alive. He walked out before she could respond, leaving her standing there with fury and hurt warring in her chest. Her phone buzzed Finn, sending a string of terrible jokes to start her morning. The reminder of why she was here cooled her anger to something manageable. Kieran was right. She hated that he was right, but he was. She'd signed up for a performance, time to commit to the role. The protocol instructor, a stern woman named Madame Rousseau, spent 3 hours drilling Juliet on everything from proper fork placement to the complex hierarchy of the Western Council. 17 members, each representing a different pack or faction. Names, territories, allegiances, and most importantly enemies. Alpha Thaddeus Grayson, Madame Rousseau said, pointing to a photograph of a silver-haired man with hard eyes. Head of the Northern faction. He challenged King Kieran's right to rule 3 years ago and lost. Publicly humiliated. His son Derek is now beta to the king as part of the peace terms, but Thaddeus himself has never forgiven the defeat. He'll be looking for any weakness to exploit. Why would Kieran keep his enemy's son so close? Juliet asked. Keep your enemies closer, as they say. Also, Derek has proven unexpectedly loyal. Some sons don't share their father's grudges. Madame Rousseau moved to the next photo. Alpha Vivian Ashford, Southern faction leader. Beautiful, cunning, and utterly ruthless. There are rumors she was briefly involved with the king years ago. Before, she stopped abruptly. Before what? Juliet pressed. before he stopped being involved with anyone. Madame Rousseau's expression closed. Ancient history. What matters now is that Vivian will see you as competition, even though you're already engaged. She's the type to test boundaries, to flirt with the king right in front of you to see if you'll react. Don't. Juliet studied the photograph. Vivian Ashford was stunning, sharp cheekbones, amber eyes, the kind of predatory beauty that made other women feel inferior just by existing. Of course Kieran had been involved with her. Of course. Why did that knowledge feel like claws in her chest? The lunch with the ladies' auxiliary was exactly as awful as promised. 12 women arranged around an elegant table, all of them older than Juliet, all of them wearing expensive jewelry and expressions of polite hostility. "So tell us, dear," purred a woman introduced as Constance Grayson, wife of Thaddeus. Juliet noted, "How exactly did you meet our king?" The engagement was so sudden. Juliet smiled and recited the prepared story. "We met at a charity gala 3 months ago. He spilled champagne on my dress, insisted on buying me a replacement, and we ended up talking all night. Sometimes you just know, don't you?" "How romantic," Constance said in a tone that meant the opposite. "And your family hails of the eastern woods, I believe?" "Such a modest pack." Translation: Nobodies. "My father served honorably as a territorial guard," Juliet replied evenly. "My mother was a healer. They taught me that strength comes from character, not bloodline." A few women exchanged glances. One of them, younger than the rest with kind eyes, leaned forward. "I think that's lovely. Not everyone can trace their ancestry back centuries. What matters is who you are now." "Thank you, Lady Rebecca," Juliet said, grateful for the support even as she noticed Constance's expression sour. The questions continued, growing more pointed. Where had she gone to school? What pack traditions had she been raised with? What did she know about Luna responsibilities? Had she completed any of the traditional trials? With each answer, Juliet felt them cataloging her inadequacies. Too poor, too unknown, too unprepared, an outsider who didn't belong in their elite world. "One more question," Constance said, as dessert was served. "The king has been unattached for quite some time, focused entirely on his duties. What makes you think you can hold the attention of a man who's never needed anyone?" The table went silent. Even the servers seemed to freeze. Juliet met Constance's eyes and saw the trap. If she claimed Kieran loved her, they'd look for proof and find the performance lacking. If she admitted he didn't, she'd reveal the cracks in their facade. "I don't presume to hold anyone's attention," Juliet said carefully. "But I can promise that I'll stand beside him, support his rule, and serve this pack with everything I have." Isn't that what being Luna means? It wasn't a perfect answer, but it shifted the ground beneath the question, made it about duty rather than love. Constance's smile sharpened. "How very practical of you." By the time Juliet returned to the suite at 3 p.m., she was exhausted and her head pounded from maintaining perfect composure for 6 straight hours. Eleanor was waiting with 3 evening gowns laid out on the bed. "His Majesty sent word that he prefers the blue one," Eleanor said. "It matches his tie." Of course it did. Every detail coordinated, every appearance calculated. Juliet showered, let Eleanor work magic with her hair and makeup, and eventually found herself staring at a stranger in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back was polished, elegant, wearing a sapphire gown that hugged every curve before flowing to the floor. Diamond earrings borrowed from the Blackthorn family collection caught the light. Her dark hair had been styled in an intricate updo that exposed the fake mate mark on her shoulder. She looked like a Luna, like someone who belonged at a king's side. The illusion was perfect. "You're beautiful," Eleanor said softly. "He won't be able to take his eyes off you." But he would, Juliet thought. Because Kieran could look at her all night and never actually see her. That was the whole point of the arrangement. At 6:45 p.m., she waited in the sitting room, her hands folded to hide their shaking. The door opened and Kieran entered, stopping short when he saw her. For exactly 3 seconds, something flickered in those ice blue eyes. Heat, maybe, or surprise, or something. Then the shutters came down, and he was all business again. "You look appropriate," he said, which was possibly the least romantic compliment in history. "Thank you," Juliet managed. "You look appropriate, too." He did more than that. He looked devastating in a black suit, with a blue tie that exactly matched her dress, his dark hair perfectly styled, his alpha presence radiating controlled power. Every inch the king who'd unified 3 warring packs. Kieran crossed to her and offered his arm. Ready? Not even close. Yes. His hand covered hers where it rested on his arm, the touch sending electricity racing up her spine. Remember, he said quietly. You belong here. You're mine. Act like it. Then they walked out together, to face the wolves, who'd love nothing more than to tear them both apart. Council Hall was impressive in the way government buildings tried to project power, all marble and dark wood and vaulted ceilings. Wolves in evening attire filled the grand dining room, conversations flowing like wine. Every head turned when Kieran entered with Juliet on his arm. The weight of their attention was suffocating. Alphaking Blackthorn, a voice called out. And the mysterious Luna-to-be. We've been eager to meet her. Thaddeus Grayson emerged from the crowd, his silver hair gleaming, his expression professionally pleasant and privately hostile. Up close, he was bigger than his photo suggested, an alpha in his prime, radiating dominance. Thaddeus. Kieran acknowledged coolly. Allow me to introduce my mate, Juliet Hale. His hand moved to the small of her back. Possessive, proprietary. Exactly what a mate would do. Juliet forced herself to lean into the touch naturally. Charmed, Thaddeus said, taking her hand and kissing it just a fraction too long. Tell me, my dear, are you prepared for the responsibilities that come with being Luna? It's not all pretty dresses and state dinners. The role requires strength, cunning, and absolute loyalty to the pack. I understand the weight of the position, Juliet replied. And I'm honored to serve. Serve. Thaddeus smiled. What an interesting word choice. Most Lunas would say lead. Beside her, Kieran went very still. Juliet will lead as Luna alongside me as Alpha King. Her strength is her own, not something that requires your validation. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Other conversations faltered as wolves sensed the confrontation building. Of course, Thaddeus said smoothly. No offense intended. I simply worry about a Luna without traditional training facing the challenges of ruling the Western Territories. So many threats, both external and internal. One must be prepared for anything. Then it's fortunate, a new voice interjected, that she has the strongest alpha in 3 generations protecting her. Vivian Ashford glided into view wearing a dress that was technically appropriate but strategically designed to showcase every asset. Her amber eyes swept over Juliet with the assessment of a predator sizing up competition. Vivian, Kieran said, his voice carefully neutral. Kieran. She smiled, warm and familiar in a way that made Juliet's wolf snarl. You look well. Command suits you. Her gaze flickered to Juliet. And this must be the mate everyone's buzzing about. How delightful. I'm Vivian Ashford, an old friend of the King's. The emphasis on old friend carried volumes. Juliet Hale, Juliet replied, extending her hand. Pleasure to meet you. Vivian's handshake was firm, competitive. The pleasure is mine. Tell me, how are you finding life at the estate? Such a big place for someone unaccustomed to luxury. Not overwhelming, I hope? Every word was a carefully placed knife. The estate is beautiful, Juliet said evenly. Though I'm finding the best part is the company. She looked up at Kieran with what she hoped was adoration, playing her part. His arm tightened around her waist in response, approval or warning. She couldn't tell. How sweet, Vivian purred. Young love is always so innocent. She turned to Kieran. Save me a dance later? For old time's sake? Perhaps, Kieran said noncommittally. I'll consider that a yes. Vivian drifted away, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and implied history. Juliet wanted to ask what exactly old friend meant. But they were already being approached by another council member. Then another. An endless parade of wolves who smiled while cataloging her every flaw. By the time they sat for dinner, Juliet's face hurt from maintaining a pleasant expression. Kieran sat at the head of the table with her at his right hand, the Luna's traditional position. Throughout the meal, he played his part perfectly, touching her hand, leaning close to murmur comments meant only for her, his attention seemingly focused on her even while managing political conversations with the skill of someone who'd been born to rule. It was a masterful performance. If Juliet hadn't known the truth, she would have believed he was genuinely infatuated. "You're doing well," he murmured during a lull between courses, his breath warm against her ear. "Keep it up. Just a performance note. Nothing real." After dinner, music began, a string quartet playing something classical and elegant. Couples moved to the dance floor, and Juliet's stomach knotted when she realized the expectation. Kieran stood and offered his hand. "Shall we?" She'd never danced like this before, formal, ballroom style. The kind of dancing that required actual skill. But she took his hand anyway because refusing would raise questions. He led her onto the floor and pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers. "Follow my lead," he instructed quietly. "And for God's sake, smile. You look like you're facing execution." "I might be, if I step on your feet, in front of the entire council." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "I'll survive." Then they were moving, and somehow impossibly Juliet's body knew how to follow his. Maybe it was the mate bond, even fake as it was. Or maybe Kieran was just that good at leading. Either way, they flowed together like water, like they'd been dancing together for years. Around them, other couples watched, judging, assessing, looking for cracks in the facade. Kieran pulled her closer, until barely an inch separated them. "They're waiting for proof," he said against her hair. "Proof that we're really mated." "What kind of proof?" "This kind." He kissed her. Not a chaste peck, but a real kiss, deep, claiming, possessive. His hand fisted in her hair, his body pressed against hers. Every wolf in the room would scent his claim on her, see his desire, and believe. Juliet's mind went blank. Her wolf surged forward, desperate and wanting. For one perfect, terrible moment, she forgot it was pretend. Forgot about contracts and conditions and careful distance. Forgot everything except the way Kieran tasted like winter and want. The way his hand curved around her waist like she belonged there. The way her entire body lit up at his touch. Then he pulled back, and she saw it in his eyes. Calculation. Assessment. Checking if the performance had been convincing. It had been. The whole room had gone silent, staring. "Perfect," Kieran murmured. "Just for her. Now they'll believe." Right, of course, the kiss meant nothing. Just another calculated move from a king who'd warned her he was incapable of love. They finished the dance in silence. After, Juliet smiled and made small talk and played her role flawlessly, even though she felt like she was shattering inside. Because that kiss had felt real, had felt like coming home. But it wasn't. It couldn't be. And she had 11 more months of this slow torture ahead. Chapter 3. They didn't speak on the drive back to the estate. Kieran stared out his window at the passing darkness while Juliet pressed herself against the opposite door, maintaining as much distance as the back seat of a town car allowed. The kiss replayed in her mind on an endless loop, the heat of it, the claiming possessiveness, the way her entire body had responded like it was made to fit against his, and the cold calculation in his eyes when he'd pulled away. Perfect. Now they'll believe. The car pulled into the circular driveway. Kieran was out before it fully stopped, his long strides carrying him toward the entrance without waiting for her. Juliet followed more slowly, her feet aching in the borrowed heels, her head pounding from hours of performing. Inside the suite, Kieran went straight to the sitting room and poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. He drank it standing, still wearing his suit jacket, tension radiating from every line of his body. "You did well tonight," he said without looking at her. "Better than I expected." Juliet kicked off the heels, relishing the relief. "High praise. I mean it." He turned finally, ice blue eyes unreadable. "The council was skeptical, but you held your ground. Constance Grayson tried to rattle you and failed. Vivian tested you and you passed. Even Thaddeus seemed, if not convinced, at least uncertain enough to hold his tongue. What did Vivian mean by old friend? The question escaped before Juliet could stop it. Kieran's expression shuddered completely. Ancient history. Irrelevant. Is it? Because she looked at you like what? His voice went cold. Like she had claimed to me? She doesn't. No one does. That's the entire point of this arrangement, Juliet. I belong to no one. And you'd do well to remember that before you start acting like a jealous mate. The words hit like a slap. I'm not jealous. I'm trying to understand the dynamics so I don't get blindsided. The dynamics are simple. He set down his glass with controlled precision. Vivian and I had a brief involvement 3 years ago. It ended. She's ambitious enough to see the Luna position as a prize worth claiming, but she has no real power over me. That's all you need to know. 3 years ago. The same time frame as Thaddeus's failed challenge. Whatever had happened to Kieran, whatever had turned him into this closed-off, ice-cold version of an alpha had happened around then. Juliet would bet her contract on it. But clearly he wasn't going to elaborate. Fine, she said tiredly. Is there anything else I need to debrief about, or can I go to bed? One thing. Kieran moved closer, and Juliet's pulse jumped despite everything. The kiss. It worked. The council saw what they needed to see a mating bond strong enough to be convincing. We'll need to maintain that level of physical authenticity going forward. Public displays of affection, intimate touches, the appearance of genuine desire. Juliet's stomach twisted. You want to kiss me again? I want to sell the illusion. If that requires kissing, then yes. His gaze dropped to her mouth. Clinical and assessing. You respond well enough. Your wolf recognizes the alpha dominance and reacts appropriately. We can work with that. Responds well enough. Like she was a prop he was evaluating for performance quality. I'm glad my wolf's cooperation meets your standards, Juliet said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Anything else, or are we done objectifying my instinctive reactions to your alpha pheromones? Something flickered in his expression too fast to read. Are you angry with me? No, Your Majesty. I'm perfectly fine with being kissed like you mean it in public and then debriefed like a business transaction in private. Why would that bother me? Because you're forgetting the terms of our agreement. Kieran closed the remaining distance between them, suddenly towering over her, his alpha presence washing over her in waves. I told you explicitly no feelings. If that kiss affected you beyond the physical, if you're starting to confuse performance with reality, we have a problem. Juliet lifted her chin, refusing to back down even though her wolf was whimpering at the dominance display. The only problem is you thinking you can control emotions like you control everything else. You can't order someone not to feel things, Kieran. That's not how hearts work. Then learn to control yours, he said flatly. Because mine isn't available. Not for you. Not for anyone. I thought I made that clear. Crystal clear. You're emotionally unavailable, incapable of love, and I'm just a warm body you're paying to play pretend with for 12 months. Got it. Message received. She turned away, suddenly desperate to put distance between them. I'm going to bed. Juliet. Good night, Your Majesty. She walked into the bedroom and closed the door, not slamming it. That would be too much, but firmly enough to make a point. Then she stood there shaking, furious with herself for caring, furious with him for being exactly what he'd warned her he was. Through the door, she heard him move, heard the clink of glass as he poured another drink, heard the heavy silence of a man who'd built walls so high around himself that he'd forgotten what it felt like to be reached. Juliet changed into her sleep clothes, one of the new silk sets that had appeared in her dresser, because even her pajamas had to be appropriate now, and climbed into her side of the massive bed. She lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the evening, the dance, the kiss, the way Kieran had held her like she was precious, and then discussed it like a tactical maneuver. She was in so much trouble, because despite his warnings, despite his explicit condition, despite knowing better in every possible way she was falling for him, had been falling since that first meeting in his study, maybe since that moment 4 years ago when he'd walked past her without seeing her and something in her chest had recognized him anyway. And she had 11 months left to hide it. The next week fell into a brutal routine. Kieran woke at 5 for training. Juliet woke at 7 for meetings with Eleanor, Madame Rousseau, or various pack officials who needed to get to know the future Luna. They had dinner together most nights silent. Awkward affairs where Kieran reviewed documents while Juliet pushed food around her plate. Then he'd retreat to his study to work until midnight, while she lay alone in their shared bed, hyper-aware of his absence. The only time he touched her was in public. At pack gatherings, his hand would settle possessively at her waist. During council meetings, he'd reach for her hand under the table. Once, at a charity gala, he'd pulled her into his lap while discussing territory negotiations with the southern faction, his arm locked around her waist, his scent marking her thoroughly. Each touch was calculated. Strategic. Designed to sell the illusion to watching eyes. And each touch destroyed her a little more. because her body responded like it was real while her mind knew the truth. On the 8th day, Juliet woke to find Kieran already dressed and standing by the window, his phone pressed to his ear. His expression was carved from granite. "How many casualties?" he asked quietly. Then, "Understood. Lock down the eastern border. No one in or out until we identify the attackers." A pause. "I'll be there within the hour." He ended the call and finally noticed Juliet was awake. "There's been an incident. Rogue wolves attacked a border patrol. 3 dead, 5 wounded." Juliet sat up, sleep forgotten. "Rogues? I thought the territories were secure." "They were. This is the first organized attack in 18 months. His jaw tightened. "I need to handle this personally. You'll stay here with Eleanor and the household guard. Don't leave the estate grounds for any reason." "How long will you be gone?" "As long as it takes." He grabbed his jacket, already moving toward the door. Then he paused, looking back at her. For a moment, something almost like concern flickered across his face. "Stay safe, Juliet. The rogues are becoming bolder, and if they know about us, you could be a target." Then he was gone, and Juliet was left alone in a bed that suddenly felt enormous and empty. 3 days passed. Then 4. Kieran called twice, brief. Terse conversations about estate security and council politics, nothing personal. Juliet tried not to worry. Tried to focus on her Luna training. Tried to ignore the growing anxiety in her chest every time she thought about him facing unknown enemies at the border. On the 5th day, Finn called with news that made her forget everything else. "They accepted me," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "The German trial. Dr. Rivera submitted my application. And they accepted me, Juliet. I start in 6 weeks." Relief crashed over her so hard she had to sit down. "That's amazing. That's God, Finn. That's everything." "Yeah." She could hear him crying now, trying to hide it. I might get better. Real better, not just manage symptoms, doctor. Rivera says if the treatment works, I could be back to normal within a year. Maybe 2. Normal. A future. The reason she'd signed Kieran's contract in the first place. "I'm so proud of you," Juliet managed through her own tears. "You're going to beat this thing. Only because of you." Finn's voice steadied. "I don't know how you got the money together, and honestly I'm afraid to ask. But whatever you did, whatever sacrifices you made, thank you. You saved my life, Juliet. Whatever sacrifices you made." If he only knew. She looked around the luxury suite, thought about the fake mark on her shoulder, about the man who'd paid $300,000 for her to pretend to love him while explicitly forbidding real feelings. "You're my brother," she said simply. "I'd do anything for you." After they hung up, Juliet let herself cry relief, exhaustion, the accumulated stress of playing Luna while falling for a king who'd made it clear he'd never love her back. She cried for Finn and his second chance, for herself and the impossible situation she'd chosen, for Kieran and whatever had broken him so thoroughly that he'd rather pay for fake affection than risk real connection. She was still crying when the door opened and Kieran walked in, covered in blood. Juliet shot to her feet. "Oh my God, not mine," he said immediately, though his voice was rough with exhaustion. "The rogues fought harder than expected. We captured their leader. He's in custody now, being interrogated." He looked wrecked. His clothes were torn and stained. Dirt and blood smeared his face. But his eyes looked almost human for once, stripped of their usual ice by whatever he'd witnessed at the border. "You're hurt," Juliet said, spotting the gash across his forearm despite his denial. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing. Sit down." She grabbed the first aid kit Eleanor had shown her on day 1, pointed to the chair. "Sit. Now." For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then something in him seemed to give way, and he collapsed into the chair like a puppet with cut strings. Up close, the exhaustion was even more apparent, dark circles under his eyes, lines of tension around his mouth, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to unfasten his ruined shirt. "Let me," Juliet said quietly. She unbuttoned the shirt carefully, trying not to react to the expanse of muscled chest beneath, to the new bruises blooming across his ribs, to the way his breath caught when she accidentally touched bare skin. She cleaned the arm wound first deep, but not requiring stitches, then moved to the smaller cuts on his face and hands. "What happened out there?" she asked, dabbing antiseptic on a cut above his eyebrow. The rogues weren't random. Kieran's eyes closed, whether from exhaustion or her ministrations, she couldn't tell. They were organized, well-armed. They knew exactly where our patrols would be and when. Someone gave them intelligence. A traitor? Possibly. Or someone on the council using rogues as proxies to test my defenses. His jaw clenched. 3 good wolves died. Juliet. 3 wolves under my protection. Dead because I didn't see the threat coming. She heard the guilt in his voice, the weight of leadership that demanded perfection and punished failure with blood. Without thinking, she cupped his face gently, making him look at her. "You can't predict everything," she said. "You can't prevent every death. You're powerful, Kieran, but you're not omniscient." His eyes opened, and she was startled by the raw vulnerability there. "I'm supposed to protect them. That's what an alpha does. That's what a king does. And I failed." "You didn't fail," you responded. "You captured the threat. You're keeping everyone safer because of what you learned." Her thumb brushed his cheekbone without permission, and she watched his eyes darken. "Stop carrying every death like it's personal penance. Why are you being kind to me?" The question was barely a whisper. "Because I love you," she thought. "Because even when you're pushing me away, I see the man beneath the ice, and he's worth caring about. Because you need it," she said instead. They stayed like that for a long moment, her standing between his legs, her hands on his face, his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that stole her breath. The air between them crackled with something dangerous, something that had nothing to do with contracts or performances. Then Kieran's hand came up to cover hers, his fingers curling around her wrist. "Juliet." The way he said her name, rough, wanting, almost broken, made her wolf howl with need. "You should shower," she managed, though her voice came out breathless. "You're exhausted." "I should," he agreed. But he didn't move, didn't let go of her wrist, just kept staring at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Finally, with visible effort, he released her and stood. "Thank you, for..." He gestured vaguely at the first aid supplies. "For this. Any time." He nodded once and disappeared into the bathroom. Juliet heard the shower turn on and collapsed into the chair he'd vacated, her heart racing, her hands shaking. That moment, whatever that had been, had felt real. The vulnerability in his eyes, the way he'd held her wrist like letting go physically hurt, the naked want in his voice when he'd said her name. Real or just exhaustion dropping his walls. She was still trying to figure it out when Kieran emerged from the bathroom in sleep pants, his hair damp, his chest bare. He looked marginally more human, though the exhaustion remained. "Come to bed," Juliet said, surprising herself. "You need sleep." He should have argued, should have retreated to his study like always. Instead, he nodded and climbed into his side of the bed. Juliet turned off the lights and settled into her side, maintaining their usual careful distance. 5 minutes passed in silence. Then, "Juliet?" "Yeah?" "Your brother. The phone call earlier. I heard you crying. Is he..." "He got into the trial," she said, throat tight. "He's going to Germany in 6 weeks. Silence. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. "I'm glad." And despite everything, the contract, the conditions, the careful walls between them, Juliet smiled in the darkness. Because Kieran Blackthorne, the ice-cold Alphaking who claimed he was incapable of caring, had just expressed genuine gladness about her brother's health. Maybe there was hope after all. Maybe. Juliet woke in the middle of the night to Kieran thrashing beside her, a low growl rumbling from his chest. His face was twisted in distress, his body rigid with tension. A nightmare. "Kieran," she whispered, reaching out carefully. "Kieran, wake up." He jolted awake with a gasp, his hand shooting out to grab her wrist in a grip that would have been painful if she'd been human. For a moment, he didn't recognize her. His eyes were wild, his wolf too close to the surface. "It's me," Juliet said calmly, not trying to pull away. "You're safe. You're home." Recognition slowly filtered back into his eyes. He released her wrist immediately, rolling away to sit on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. "I'm sorry," he said roughly. "I didn't mean to. I thought you were..." He stopped, shaking. Juliet sat up, her heart aching for him. It's okay. Everyone has nightmares. Not like mine. His voice was hollow. You should go back to sleep. She should. She should respect his boundaries. And give him space. And remember that she was just his paid companion, not his real mate who had the right to comfort him. Instead, she moved closer, until she was sitting behind him, close enough to feel his heat but not quite touching. Tell me about her. Kieran went completely still. What? The woman who broke you. The reason you built these walls. Tell me about her. No. Flat. Final. Kieran. I said no. He stood abruptly, moving to the window, putting distance between them. That part of my life is none of your concern. It has nothing to do with our arrangement. Doesn't it? Juliet challenged. You asked me to pretend to be your mate. To play the role of a woman who loves you. But you won't even tell me why you need the pretense in the first place. How am I supposed to understand you if you won't let me in? You're not supposed to understand me. He spun to face her. And for the first time, real emotion cracked through the ice pane, old and deep and still bleeding. You're supposed to smile and play your part, and take your money, and leave when the year is up. That's the agreement. That's all this is. Is it? She climbed out of bed, suddenly furious. Because it doesn't feel like just an agreement, when you look at me the way you did tonight. When you hold my wrist like letting go hurts. When you have nightmares bad enough to make an Alphaking shake. Those are my demons to carry, not yours. What if I want to help carry them? Then you'd be a fool. His voice went cold again, walls slamming back into place. I told you from the beginning I'm not capable of love. Whatever happened to me, whoever she was, it broke something fundamental. I can give you wealth, protection, the Luna title, but I can't give you my heart. Because I don't have one anymore. It died with... He stopped abruptly, his expression shuddering completely. With her, Juliet finished quietly. The woman in your nightmares. What was her name? For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. Serafina. Her name was Serafina. And she was everything. And when she died, when I failed to protect her, she took the best parts of me with her. The raw grief in his voice broke Juliet's heart into 1,000 pieces. She wanted to go to him, to hold him, to promise that he could heal, that he could love again. But the look on his face stopped her, a warning, a boundary, a wall built from loss so profound it had reshaped his entire soul. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be. It was 3 years ago. I've moved on. But the lie was transparent, even as he spoke it. Go back to sleep, Juliet. We have a council meeting in the morning, and you'll need your rest. He walked out of the bedroom, presumably to his study, leaving her alone with the ghost of a woman named Serafina and the terrible understanding of why Kieran had demanded she never fall in love with him. Because he was already in love with someone else. Someone dead. Someone he'd failed to protect. And no contract, no performance, no amount of pretending would ever change that. Don't forget to subscribe. Chapter 4. The knowledge of Serafina changed everything and nothing. Kieran still woke at 5 for training. Still maintained careful distance in private while playing the devoted mate in public. Still treated their arrangement like a business transaction with romantic window dressing. But now Juliet understood the why behind the walls, not just emotional unavailability, but active grief for a woman 3 years dead. She tried not to think about it. Tried to focus on her Luna training, on Finn's upcoming treatment, on memorizing the complex web of pack politics that governed her new life. But late at night, when Kieran worked in his study and she lay alone in their bed, her mind wandered to questions she had no right to ask. Who had Serafina been? How had she died? And why did Kieran blame himself? A week after the rogue attack, Juliet was reviewing supply budgets with Eleanor, when Derek Grayson, Thaddeus's son and Kieran's beta, knocked on the sitting room door. Luna, he greeted, respectful but not warm. His Majesty requests your presence in his office, immediately. Juliet's stomach tightened. Kieran never summoned her during work hours. They had their performance schedule, public events, council dinners, carefully staged appearances, but private meetings weren't part of the arrangement. Is something wrong? She asked. Derek's expression remained neutral. He didn't say. Just that it was urgent. She followed him through the estate to Kieran's office, a space she'd never been invited into before. Derek knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for acknowledgement. Kieran sat behind a massive desk covered in maps and reports, his expression carved from granite. Standing across from him was a woman. Juliet didn't recognize, petite, auburn-haired, wearing travel-stained clothes, and an expression of exhausted determination. "Juliet," Kieran said without preamble. "This is Dr. Lydia Navarro, one of our pack's research specialists. She's just returned from investigating the rogue attacks. Tell her what you told me." Dr. Navarro turned to face Juliet, her green eyes assessing. "The rogues weren't random, Luna. They were created. Deliberately turned and then set loose on our territories." Juliet's blood ran cold. "Created? By who?" "We don't know yet. But whoever's doing it has access to dark magic blood rituals, forced transformations, mental compulsion. The rogues we captured were barely coherent, driven by magical commands they couldn't resist." She pulled out a folder and extracted several photographs. "We found these symbols carved into trees near the attack sites. Recognize them." The symbols were intricate, disturbing circles within circles, runes that seemed to writhe even in still photographs. Juliet shook her head. "I've never seen anything like that. Neither have most wolves." Kieran stood, moving to stand beside Dr. Navarro. "But they match historical records of a group called the Crimson Order. Dark practitioners who believe werewolves should rule over humans, that our power makes us superior. They were supposedly eradicated 2 centuries ago." "Apparently not," Dr. Navarro said grimly. "Someone's resurrecting their methods. And based on the sophistication of the magic involved, they've been planning this for years." Juliet tried to process the implications. Why attack now? Why reveal themselves? "Because they're testing us," Kieran said, his voice deadly calm. "Testing our defenses, our response times, our vulnerabilities. The rogue attacks are just the beginning." His ice-blue eyes fixed on her. "Which is why your security detail is being doubled, effective immediately. You don't leave the estate without at least 4 guards. You don't attend any events unless I'm present. And you absolutely do not go anywhere alone. Understood?" It wasn't a request. The alpha command in his voice made her wolf instinctively want to submit, to bare her throat, to obey. But Juliet wasn't just any wolf. "You think they'll target me specifically?" "You're my mate," Kieran said flatly. "Of course they'll target you. Killing you would be the easiest way to destabilize my rule, to make me—" He stopped abruptly, his jaw clenching. "To make him vulnerable," Juliet finished silently. "The way he'd been vulnerable when Serafina died. I'll be careful," she promised. "You'll be more than careful. You'll be paranoid." He turned to Derek. "Assign your best people to her detail. I want backgrounds checked, loyalties verified, rotation schedules randomized so no one can predict patterns." "Already done, Your Majesty." After Dr. Navarro and Derek left, Juliet stayed behind, studying Kieran's face. He'd gone back to the maps, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the white-knuckled grip on the edge of the desk. "This is about her, isn't it?" Juliet said quietly. "About Serafina. You're afraid of failing to protect someone again." His head snapped up, eyes blazing. Don't what? Don't acknowledge that you're terrified? Don't point out that you're assigning an army to guard me because you can't handle the thought of losing another—" "You're not another anything," he cut her off, voice sharp as a blade. "You're a contract, Juliet. A business arrangement I need to protect because your death would undermine my political position. That's all this is." The words were meant to hurt, to push her away, to re-establish boundaries. They succeeded spectacularly. "Right," Juliet said, voice flat. "Just business. My mistake." She turned to leave, but Kieran's voice stopped her at the door. "Juliet, wait." She looked back. He was still gripping the desk, knuckles white, his expression warring between anger and something that looked almost like regret. "Just be careful," he said finally. "Please." That please, rough and reluctant, did more damage than any number of cold dismissals. Because it proved he cared, at least a little, even if he'd rather die than admit it. "I will," Juliet promised, and left before she did something stupid, like tell him she'd be careful for his sake, not her own. The increased security became apparent immediately. 4 guards accompanied her to lunch with the ladies' auxiliary. 6 shadowed her during a tour of pack schools. Derek himself insisted on supervising when she went shopping for Finn's birthday present. "Is this really necessary?" Juliet asked, as they walked through a high-end bookstore, Derek's presence making other customers nervous. "I'm just buying my brother a book." "His Majesty's orders," Derek replied, scanning the store like enemies might materialize between the shelves. After what Dr. Navarro reported, "We're not taking chances." Juliet selected a medical text Finn had mentioned wanting, then added a fantasy novel for good measure. At the register, she pulled out the credit card Eleanor had given her linked to a Blackthorn account with a limit she was afraid to know. "That'll be $143, the clerk said. As Juliet reached for the card, Derek's hand shot out, gripping her wrist hard enough to hurt. "Don't move." "What?" "That's not our regular clerk." His voice was deadly calm, but his other hand had moved to the weapon at his hip. "Security, 3 o'clock. Juliet followed his gaze and saw 2 of her guards converging on a man near the exit, tall, nondescript, watching them with too much focus. The moment the guards moved, he bolted. They caught him in seconds, tackling him to the ground. Something clattered from his hand, a syringe filled with dark liquid. Derek was already on his radio. "Possible assassination attempt at Morrison's books. Suspect in custody. Get a medical team here now to analyze the substance." Juliet stared at the syringe, her mind refusing to process. Someone had just tried to what? Poison her? Drug her? In broad daylight, in a public bookstore, surrounded by guards? "Luna. We need to leave. Now." Derek's hand on her elbow was gentle but firm, guiding her toward the back exit, where more guards materialized. The drive back to the estate passed in a blur. Derek made hushed phone calls while Juliet sat frozen, the books she'd bought forgotten on the seat beside her. It felt surreal, like something from a movie, not her actual life. At the estate, Kieran was waiting at the entrance, his expression thunderous. The moment Juliet stepped out of the car, he was there, his hands on her shoulders, his eyes scanning her frantically. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "No, I'm fine." Derek stopped him before he could inject you with God knows what. Kieran's hands tightened briefly before he released her, stepping back like her proximity burned. "Inside. Now." "Derek, with me." In his office, Derek delivered a terse report, while Kieran paced like a caged predator. The substance in the syringe was still being analyzed, but preliminary results suggested a compound designed to suppress wolf healing, to make injuries fatal that would normally be survivable. "They wanted her vulnerable," Derek said. "Inject the compound, then finish the job later when she couldn't heal." "Who was he?" Kieran asked, voice deadly soft. "Pack affiliation? Known associates?" "No pack markings, no identification. He's refusing to talk." Derek hesitated. "But Your Majesty, he had this." He pulled out an evidence bag containing a photograph of Juliet. Taken recently, based on the dress she was wearing, one she'd worn to a council dinner last week. Someone had drawn a red X across her face. Kieran took the bag with trembling hands, his expression going absolutely arctic. "Find out who hired him. I don't care what methods you have to use. Break him. Then bring me every single person involved in planning this." "Yes, Your Majesty." Derek left quickly, probably grateful to escape the killing rage radiating from his alpha. Alone with Kieran, Juliet finally let herself shake. The shock was wearing off, replaced by the terrifying realization of how close she'd come to being seriously hurt. If Derek hadn't noticed the wrong clerk, if the guards had been slower, "Breathe," Kieran ordered, suddenly in front of her, his hands on her shoulders again. "You're safe. I won't let anyone hurt you." "You can't promise that," Juliet whispered. "You can't be everywhere. Then I'll hire more guards. Install better security. Lock you in this estate if I have to." His grip tightened. "Whatever it takes, Juliet. I won't." His voice cracked. "I won't fail again." And there it was, the raw terror beneath the rage. He wasn't just protecting an asset or maintaining a political arrangement. He was trying desperately not to relive whatever had happened to Serafina. "Kieran," Juliet said softly, reaching up to touch his face before she could stop herself. "I'm not her. And this isn't the same situation." He flinched like she'd struck him. "Don't talk about things you don't understand." "Then help me understand." Tell me what happened to her, please. For a moment, she thought he might actually do it. His eyes held such naked anguish that her heart ached. Then the walls slammed back into place, and he stepped away from her touch. You should rest, he said, voice carefully controlled again. You've had a traumatic experience. Eleanor will bring dinner to the suite. I have interrogations to oversee. Kieran. That's an order, Luna. The formal title was like a slap. Rest. We'll discuss additional security measures tomorrow. He walked out, leaving Juliet alone with the photograph of herself marked for death, and the terrible knowledge that whoever was targeting her, they'd succeeded in one thing already, reminding Kieran of his worst nightmare. That night, Juliet couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old house made her jump. Every shadow seemed to hide threats. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment she'd seen that syringe, wondering what would have happened if... The bedroom door opened. Kieran stood silhouetted in the doorway, still wearing his clothes from earlier, looking exhausted and somehow older. Can't sleep? He asked quietly. No. You? No. He moved into the room slowly, like approaching a skittish animal. The suspect isn't talking yet, but we're working on it. Doctor. Navarro confirmed the compound would have left you unable to heal for approximately 72 hours. Long enough for a secondary attack to be fatal. Juliet's stomach churned. So someone really is trying to kill me. Yes. He sat on the edge of the bed his side, maintaining distance even now. I'm moving you to the secure wing. Reinforced walls, limited access points, guards stationed outside 24/7. You'll hate it, it's essentially a gilded cage. But you'll be alive. What about appearances? Juliet asked. Won't the council wonder why the Luna suddenly needs fortress-level security? I don't care what the council wonders. Your safety is more important than politics. The simple statement, delivered with such conviction, made her throat tight. Kieran, I should have taken the threat more seriously from the beginning. He continued, not looking at her. The moment Dr. Navarro mentioned the Crimson Order, I should have locked everything down, but I hoped that they'd target me directly, not. He finally turned to face her. Not you. Not someone who's just caught in the crossfire of my reign. I'm not just anything, Juliet said, borrowing his earlier words. I'm your mate. At least, that's what everyone believes. Which makes me a legitimate target, not collateral damage. You're not my mate. You're... What? She challenged. A contract? A business arrangement? Then why are you sitting here at 2 a.m. looking like you've aged 10 years because someone tried to hurt me? His jaw clenched. Because I'm responsible for your welfare. That's all. Is it? The question hung between them. Heavy and dangerous. Kieran stood abruptly, moving to the window, his back to her. The set of his shoulders screamed tension. 3 years ago, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, I had everything. A mate, a kingdom united. A future that seemed inevitable. Serafina was perfect. Strong, intelligent, kind. She made me want to be better than I was. Made me believe I could be the king these territories needed. Juliet held her breath, afraid that any sound would make him stop. We were bonded for 6 months. 6 perfect months where I was stupidly, completely happy. His hand pressed against the window glass. Then the Crimson Order, or what remained of them, sent assassins. They attacked during a council meeting, used magic to breach our defenses. And Serafina. His voice broke. She saw the knife coming for me and stepped in front of it, took a blade to the heart that was meant for mine. Oh, Kieran, Juliet whispered. She died in my arms. I felt our bond break, felt half my soul rip away. The assassins escaped in the chaos. We never caught them. He finally turned to face her, and his eyes were haunted. I'd promised to protect her, promised that being with me was safe, and she died because I failed to see the threat. It wasn't your fault, wasn't it? His laugh was bitter. I'm the Alpha King. Seeing threats is literally my job, and I missed it. Was so focused on political maneuvering that I didn't notice enemies inside my own walls. He moved closer to the bed. After she died, I swore I'd never put anyone else in that position. Never give my enemies another hostage, another lever to use against me. That's why I paid you for this arrangement, Juliet. Because if you're not really mine, if there's no actual bond, then losing you wouldn't destroy me the way losing her did. The logic was heartbreaking and completely flawed. Because contract or not, bond or not, Kieran clearly cared. The terror in his eyes when he'd seen her safe today, the rage when he'd viewed her photograph, the exhaustion from hours spent interrogating suspects, those weren't the actions of someone who didn't care. Except you do care, Juliet said softly. Maybe not the way you cared about Serafina. Maybe not as deeply or completely. But you care enough to lose sleep. Enough to assign an army to guard me. Enough to sit here at 2 a.m. explaining things you swore you'd never talk about. That's different. That's responsibility, not what? Not love? She sat up, pulling the blankets around herself. You told me not to fall in love with you because you weren't capable of loving me back. But Kieran, you're not incapable of love. You're terrified of it. There's a difference. His expression hardened. It amounts to the same thing, does it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault, using Serafina's death as an excuse to avoid ever being vulnerable again. Don't. The word was a warning. Don't psychoanalyze me based on one tragic story. You have no idea what it's like to lose your mate, to feel your soul tear in half, to know that if you'd just been faster, smarter, better. You're right, Juliet interrupted. I don't know what that's like. But I do know what it's like to watch someone I love suffer and not be able to fix it. I know what it's like to feel helpless and guilty and desperate to make things right. And I know that closing yourself off from ever caring about anyone again isn't protecting yourself, it's just a different kind of death. Silence fell, heavy and charged. Kieran stared at her with an expression she couldn't read. Anger, maybe, or fear, or something more complicated than she had words for. You should sleep, he said finally, his voice carefully neutral again. Tomorrow we move you to the secure wing. Kieran, good night, Juliet. He left the bedroom, and she heard the study door close a moment later. Juliet lay back down, her mind racing. She'd learned more about Kieran in one conversation than in weeks of living with him, but understanding his walls didn't make them any easier to breach. And the terrible truth was, she was falling deeper in love with a man who'd explicitly designed this arrangement to prevent exactly that. A man who saw her caring as a problem to be managed rather than a gift to be cherished. She had 8 months left on her contract. 8 months to pretend she wasn't in love while someone tried to kill her. 8 months to somehow reach a man who'd buried his heart 3 years ago and saw vulnerability as fatal weakness. The odds weren't in her favor. But then again, she'd never been particularly good at playing it safe. Chapter 5. The secure wing was exactly as promised, a gilded cage. Beautiful, certainly. The suite rivaled their previous quarters in luxury, with reinforced windows that could withstand rocket fire and doors thick enough to stop a battering ram. But it only had one entrance, monitored by 6 rotating guards, and every window offered a view of the interior courtyard rather than the forest beyond. Juliet felt the walls closing in within hours. It's temporary, Eleanor assured her while helping unpack. Just until His Majesty eliminates the threat. But 3 weeks passed with no progress. The suspect from the bookstore died in custody, poisoned somehow. Despite constant surveillance, his secrets dying with him. Dr. Navarro found more ritual sites in the forest, evidence of dark magic growing stronger, and Juliet remained locked in her luxury prison, going slowly mad from inactivity. Kieran threw himself into the investigation with obsessive intensity. He was gone for days at a time, tracking leads, interrogating witnesses, hunting for whoever was orchestrating the attacks. When he was home, he was distracted, distant, speaking to her only about security protocols and schedule changes. The few public appearances they made together felt mechanical. He'd touch her waist, pull her close, play the devoted mate, but his eyes were somewhere else, always scanning for threats, always calculating odds. The performance that had once felt charged with possibility now felt hollow. Juliet tried not to mind. Tried to focus on Finn, who'd arrived in Germany and started treatment with cautiously optimistic results. Tried to study Luna responsibilities and pack politics. Tried not to think about how Kieran had shared his deepest trauma and then retreated so far behind his walls that she couldn't reach him at all. On the 22nd day of her confinement, Vivian Ashford requested a private lunch. Absolutely not. Derek said when Juliet mentioned it. We're not allowing unvetted visitors into the secure wing. She's a council member, Juliet argued. You've vetted her 100 times. She's also ambitious, politically connected to several suspects, and has personal history with His Majesty that makes her motives questionable. Which is exactly why I should meet with her. Learn what she wants, maybe get information that could help the investigation. Derek looked pained. The king will have my head if anything happens to you. Then make sure nothing happens. Search her before entry. Stay in the room. Monitor everything. But Derek. Juliet softened her voice. I'm going insane in here. Please, let me do something useful. He wavered, then sighed. I'll ask His Majesty. Kieran's response came via text an hour later. Fine. But Derek stays present. And if Vivian makes one move that seems threatening, the meeting ends immediately. So 2 days later, Juliet sat across from Vivian Ashford in the secure wing's dining room, with Derek positioned by the door and 2 guards outside. Vivian had submitted to a thorough search with amusement, arriving in an elegant pantsuit that probably cost more than Juliet's entire wardrobe. Thank you for seeing me, Luna, Vivian said, her amber eyes sharp and assessing. I know security has been challenging lately. It's necessary, Juliet replied carefully, given the threats. Yes, the Crimson Order. Vivian sipped her wine. Nasty business. I remember when they tried to rise before, back when Kieran's father ruled. King Aldrich crushed them without mercy, burned their compounds, executed their leaders publicly. Some say he was too brutal, that his methods created the rebels who eventually turned against him. The shift to Kieran's father was deliberate. Juliet could feel the test in it. How much did she know about Blackthorn history? How much had Kieran shared? History is complicated, Juliet said neutrally. Past actions create present consequences in ways we can't always predict. Vivian's lips curved in a smile. Diplomatic. Madame Rousseau has trained you well. She set down her glass. I'll be direct, Luna. The council is concerned. 3 weeks of lockdown, a Luna who never appears publicly, a king consumed with hunting shadows, it creates uncertainty, and in uncertain times, factions grow bold. What factions? The usual suspects. Thaddeus Grayson still wants Kieran's throne. Several Southern Alphas think I should be Luna instead of you, no offense. They're idiots. And there are whispers that the Crimson Order has infiltrated the council itself, that someone is feeding them intelligence. Vivian leaned forward. I'm telling you this because despite what you might think, I don't want to see Kieran fall. He's a good king. The territories are more stable under his rule than they've been in generations. But? Juliet prompted, hearing the unspoken caveat. But he's distracted. Obsessed with protecting you, to the point where he's neglecting other threats. And his enemies know it. Vivian's gaze sharpened. They know that the best way to destroy him isn't through direct attack, it's through you. Make him choose between his mate and his kingdom. And watch him tear himself apart trying to save both. The words hit too close to home. Juliet thought about Serafina, about how her death had nearly broken Kieran completely, about how he'd designed this entire arrangement to avoid that vulnerability, only to find himself caught in the same trap. What are you suggesting? Juliet asked. I'm suggesting that maybe the best way to protect Kieran is to remove his weakness. Vivian's tone was casual, but her eyes were intent. End the engagement. Disappear back to wherever you came from. Let him rule without the distraction of a mate to protect. Juliet's stomach dropped. You want me to leave? I want him to survive. There's a difference. Vivian stood, smoothing her jacket. Think about it, Luna. You signed a contract, didn't you? 1 year, a substantial sum, mutually beneficial arrangement. I've been around long enough to recognize the signs. Whatever this is between you two, it's not a true mate bond. And if it's not real, then why let it destroy him? She walked out before Juliet could respond, leaving the implication hanging in the air like poison. You're not his real mate. You're just making things worse. Derek closed the door behind Vivian, his expression troubled. She's trying to manipulate you. Is she wrong? Juliet asked quietly. About what? About me being a distraction. A weakness he can't afford. She looked at Derek, This stoic beta who'd served Kieran faithfully through everything. If I left, would he be safer? Derek was silent for a long moment. Then, 3 years ago, after Luna Serafina died, His Majesty became someone I barely recognized. Cold. Ruthless. He won battles but lost parts of himself with each victory. He was an excellent king but a miserable man. He met her eyes. Since you arrived, I've seen glimpses of who he used to be. Small moments where he laughs, or shows concern, or expresses something beyond strategic calculation. You haven't made him weaker, Luna. You've reminded him he's still human beneath the crown. The words should have comforted her. Instead, they made everything worse. Because Derek was describing a man who was healing, who was slowly learning to feel again, and Juliet was falling in love with him while he explicitly forbade it. While assassins hunted her, while the weight of a kingdom pressed down on both of them. Vivian was right about one thing. This couldn't continue. Something had to give. That night, Kieran returned from another fruitless investigation, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Juliet was waiting in the sitting room, having made a decision that terrified her. "We need to talk," she said. He poured himself whiskey, drank half, then turned to face her. "If this is about the secure wing, I'm not negotiating. You stay here until—" "It's not about the secure wing." Juliet stood, her heart hammering. "It's about us. About this arrangement." His expression shuddered. "What about it?" "It's not working, Kieran. Someone is trying to kill me because of you. You're tearing yourself apart trying to protect me. And the council is using our relationship as a weapon against your rule." Vivian was right. "I'm a weakness you can't afford." "Vivian came here?" His voice went dangerous. "What did she say to you?" "The truth. That this fake engagement is destroying you. That your enemies know the best way to hurt you is through me." Juliet forced the words out even though they felt like swallowing glass. "Maybe we should end it. Break the contract, stage a public separation, let you rule without this liability." Silence. Kieran stared at her with an expression she couldn't read, his knuckles white around the glass. "You want to leave," he said finally. "I want you to survive. There's a difference." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Clever. Throwing my own words back at me." He drained his whiskey, set down the glass with controlled precision. "Fine. If that's what you want, we'll arrange it. Give me a week to craft the narrative: public disagreement, fundamental differences, mutual decision. You'll keep the money as specified in the contract. I'll ensure you and your brother have security for the next 5 years. Clean break." Juliet's chest felt like it was caving in. This was the right decision, the logical decision. So why did it feel like dying? "Kieran, was there anything else?" His voice was arctic. "Because I have work to finish." This was it. Her chance to tell him the truth, to admit she'd broken the cardinal rule and fallen in love with him, to fight for something real instead of accepting this calculated separation. But one look at his face, at the ice-blue eyes that held nothing but cold assessment, at the rigid posture that screamed rejection, at the walls so high she'd need a ladder to reach him, killed the words in her throat. He didn't want her truth. He'd paid her specifically not to develop feelings, and she'd failed. Telling him now would just make everything worse. "No," Juliet whispered. "Nothing else." "Good." He moved toward his study, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, you played the part well. Better than I expected. Anyone who saw us together believed it was real." It was real, she wanted to scream. "At least for me." Instead, she said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." The formal title made him flinch, just slightly. Then he was gone, the study door closing with awful finality. Juliet stood alone in the sitting room, and let herself acknowledge the truth. She'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Not because ending the arrangement was wrong, it probably was the smart, strategic choice. But because she was giving up without fighting, accepting his walls as insurmountable instead of trying to break through them. She'd fallen in love with Kieran Blackthorne knowing it was forbidden, knowing he'd explicitly warned her against it. And now she was walking away because staying was too hard, too painful, too much like watching him destroy himself while being unable to help. "Coward," her wolf snarled. "We don't run from our mate." "He's not our mate," Juliet reminded her. He's our employer. And this arrangement was always temporary. But that night, alone in the massive bed that still carried Kieran's scent, Juliet cried for what could never be, for the man she loved who couldn't love her back, for the future she'd imagined despite knowing better, for the loss of something that had never actually been hers to lose. The next 7 days passed in agonizing slow motion. Kieran was gone more than he was present. And when they were in the same room, he spoke to her with painful formality. The warmth that had occasionally crept into their interactions, the concern after the assassination attempt, the vulnerability when he'd shared about Serafina had vanished completely. They were back to strangers. Or worse, professional colleagues fulfilling contractual obligations. On the 6th day, Eleanor brought Juliet a dress for the final public appearance. His Majesty wants you to wear this to tomorrow's harvest gala. It's the last major event before the announcement. The dress was stunning deep emerald silk that would complement Juliet's skin perfectly. Clearly chosen with care, probably by Kieran himself, which made it hurt worse. Even when ending their arrangement, he was paying attention to details. "Eleanor," Juliet asked quietly, "do you think I'm making a mistake? Leaving?" The older woman's expression softened. "I think you're doing what you believe is right. But I also think you're both too stubborn and too broken to see what's plainly obvious to everyone else." "What's that?" "That this stopped being an arrangement weeks ago. Maybe from the first night you treated his wounds after the border attack. Maybe earlier, when he kissed you at that council dinner, and looked surprised by how much he meant it." Eleanor touched Juliet's shoulder gently. "But what do I know? I'm just the housekeeper." She left Juliet with the dress, and questions that had no good answers. The harvest gala was held in the estate's grand ballroom, transformed into an autumn wonderland with golden lights and harvest decorations. Every important wolf in the Western Territories attended, council members, pack alphas, influential families. This was where Kieran and Juliet would make their final appearance as an engaged couple before announcing their separation. Juliet wore the emerald dress and played her part perfectly. She smiled, made small talk, graciously accepted congratulations on her engagement even though it was about to end. And she tried desperately not to notice how devastatingly handsome Kieran looked in his formal attire, how his hand at her waist felt like coming home, how his scent made her wolf whimper with loss. Halfway through the evening, he led her onto the dance floor. The last dance, she realized, the final performance. "You look beautiful," Kieran said as they moved together, the choreography familiar now after weeks of practice. "Thank you. You look," her voice caught. "You look like a king." Something flickered in his eyes. "Juliet, don't," she interrupted. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." They danced in silence after that, surrounded by watching wolves who had no idea they were witnessing the end rather than the celebration. The music swelled, romantic and bittersweet, and Juliet memorized everything. The feel of Kieran's hand in hers, the strength of his arm around her waist, the way he smelled like cedar wood in winter storms, the ice-blue eyes that had haunted her dreams since the first moment she'd seen him 4 years ago. When the song ended, he kept holding her for a moment too long. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For all of it." Then he released her and stepped back, the distance between them feeling like a chasm. Juliet was searching for something to say, anything that might bridge that gap when the lights went out. Screams erupted, glass shattered. And in the darkness, Juliet felt hands grab her, strong and unfamiliar, dragging her away from the ballroom while chaos exploded around them. She tried to scream, but a cloth pressed over her mouth and nose, and the chemical smell was the last thing she registered before the world went black. Juliet woke slowly, her head pounding, her mouth tasting like metal. She was lying on cold stone in near darkness, her hands bound behind her back with rope that burned against her wrists. Her wolf was there but sluggish, still recovering from whatever drug they'd used. Memory returned in fragments. The gala, the darkness being grabbed. Someone had attacked during the harvest celebration, during the one moment when security had been split between protecting the event and monitoring the secure wing. "Awake finally," a voice said from the shadows. "Good. We've been waiting." A figure stepped into the dim light, and Juliet's blood ran cold. It was the woman from Dr. Navarro's photographs. The one wearing dark practitioner robes, standing over ritual sites. Except now she wasn't in photos, she was here, real and terrifying, with symbols carved into her exposed forearms that seemed to writhe in the flickering torchlight. "My name is Morgana," the woman said pleasantly, like they were meeting at a garden party. "And you, little false Luna, are going to help me destroy the Alphaking." Chapter 6. The Witch's Triumph. The dungeon, because that's what it was, medieval and horrifying, smelled like death and old magic. Juliet's wrists burned where the ropes bit into skin, infused with some compound that prevented her wolf from healing. She'd tested them twice, earning nothing but bloody friction burns for her efforts. Morgana circled her like a predator assessing prey, her dark practitioner robes whispering against stone. The symbols carved into her arms glowed faintly in the torchlight, pulsing with a rhythm that matched no heartbeat Juliet had ever felt. "You're wondering why," Morgana said conversationally. "Why go through all this trouble for a fake mate? A contract queen who means nothing to the great Kieran Blackthorn." Juliet stayed silent, refusing to give this woman anything. "I'll tell you anyway. You see, 3 years ago, the Alphaking made a mistake. He killed my sister." Morgana's voice remained pleasant, but her eyes blazed with hatred. "Oh, he called it justice. Called her a traitor and an assassin. Had her executed publicly for daring to strike at his precious Serafina. But Celeste was my family. My blood, and blood demands blood." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. "Your sister was part of the Crimson Order. She's the one who killed Serafina." "She was the blade," Morgana corrected. "I was the hand that guided it. We planned for months, infiltrated the palace, studied the defenses, waited for the perfect moment. But we only managed one kill before Kieran's guards caught Celeste. She died screaming while I watched from the shadows, unable to save her. So this is revenge. This is justice." Morgana stopped pacing, her expression hardening. "Kieran took my sister. So I'll take everything from him. His mate, even a fake one, then his throne, then his life. But not quickly. No, I want him to suffer first. Want him to watch helplessly, while another woman he's supposed to protect dies because of him." Juliet's stomach twisted. "He'll come for me. I'm counting on it." Morgana smiled, cold and cruel. "In fact, I've already sent him directions. He should arrive in approximately." She checked a delicate watch. 3 hours. Just enough time to prepare the ritual. "What ritual?" "The one that will drain his power into me while you watch. You see, the Crimson Order believes werewolves should rule. And I agree. But we need a stronger leader than Kieran, someone willing to do what's necessary. Someone like me." She gestured, and 2 robed figures emerged from the shadows, carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth. "I've spent 3 years gathering ingredients, perfecting the spell. Alphaking blood is the final component. Once I drain his power and claim his territories, I'll reshape wolf society into what it was always meant to be." The robed figures began drawing symbols on the floor with something dark and viscous. "Blood," Juliet realized with horror. "Fresh blood, recently spilled." "You won't get away with this," Juliet said, hating how weak her voice sounded. "Derek knows about the Crimson Order. Dr. Navarro has been tracking your movements. The Council has 3 members loyal to my cause, and 4 more who'll support whoever holds power." Morgana knelt to examine the symbols, making corrections with casual precision. "I've been planning this for years, little Luna. Every rogue attack, every assassination attempt, every carefully placed rumor, all of it designed to destabilize Kieran's rule, and position me as the solution. Why tell me all this? Because you'll die knowing the truth, and that will make your ghost whisper it to Kieran in his nightmares." Morgana stood, brushing off her robes. "He'll spend eternity knowing he failed you just like he failed Serafina. That his love or his pretend love, in your case, is a death sentence. That everyone who gets close to him dies screaming." Juliet tested the ropes again, desperately. Her wolf snarled and pushed, trying to force a shift, but whatever coated the bindings prevented it. She was trapped, powerless, and Kieran was walking into an ambush designed specifically to destroy him. She had to warn him. Had to do something. "He doesn't love me," Juliet said, voice cracking. "You're wasting your time. We were ending the engagement anyway. He won't care if I die." Morgana laughed. "Oh, sweet child. Do you really believe that? I've had spies watching you both for weeks, The way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. The way he obsesses over your safety, assigns armies to guard you, barely sleeps because he's terrified of failing again. She crouched in front of Juliet, gripping her chin painfully. He might not admit he loves you, might not even realize it himself. But trust me, killing you will break him just as thoroughly as killing Serafina did. And then I'll have him exactly where I want him, too shattered to fight back. Horror washed over Juliet in waves. Because Morgana was right. Kieran might not love her the way he'd loved Serafina, might not even be capable of that depth of feeling anymore. But he cared. He'd shown it in 1,000 small ways, the concern in his eyes after the assassination attempt, the vulnerability when he'd shared about Serafina, the way he'd held her during that last dance like letting go physically hurt. And this witch planned to destroy him by using that caring as a weapon. Please, Juliet whispered, abandoning pride. Don't do this. Kill me if you want revenge. But don't make him watch. Don't. Oh. I absolutely must make him watch. That's the entire point. Morgana released her chin and stood. The ritual requires his conscious participation, or rather, his conscious suffering. He has to witness your death, while bound in a circle that will drain his power. He has to feel helpless while everything he is gets carved away piece by piece. Only then will the transfer be complete. She gestured to her assistants. Prepare her. And someone check the perimeter wards. I want to know the moment the Alphaking crosses into our territory. They hauled Juliet to her feet and dragged her to the center of the blood symbols, forcing her to kneel inside a circle marked with runes that made her skin crawl. The wolfbane rope was removed and replaced with silver chains burning, agonizing, attached to posts driven deep into the stone floor. Juliet pulled against them uselessly, earning only scorched flesh for her efforts. The silver was pure, probably ancient, and it suppressed her wolf almost completely. She could feel her connection to her other self growing distant, muffled, like drowning in cotton. Above her, a metal frame had been erected, some kind of cage or gibbet suspended by chains. Empty now, but clearly meant for someone. For Kieran, she realized. They'd chain him up there, force him to watch while they killed her below, use his anguish to fuel whatever dark magic would drain his power. It was elegant in its cruelty. And if Morgana had been planning this for 3 years, she'd had plenty of time to perfect every horrible detail. Ward breach, one of the robed figures announced. Alphaking detected, heading directly for this location. ETA 15 minutes. Morgana smiled. Right on schedule. Take positions. Remember, subdue, don't kill. I need him conscious and functional for the ritual. The chamber emptied except for Morgana and 2 guards. Juliet yanked at the chains again, desperate. 15 minutes until Kieran walked into a trap. 15 minutes to figure out how to warn him, to save him, to do something other than play the helpless victim. Her wolf stirred sluggishly, weak but not completely gone. If she could just shift, if she could break these chains. But the silver burned hotter. As if sensing her intention, Juliet gasped, her vision blurring with pain. Don't bother, Morgana advised. Those chains have held stronger wolves than you. Just accept your role, little Luna. Be the sacrifice that destroys a king. Kieran arrived in 12 minutes, not 15. Juliet heard him before she saw him, the sound of fighting above, roars and screams and the distinctive crack of bones breaking. Then an explosion that shook the entire underground chamber, raining dust from the ceiling. Morgana cursed. He brought back up. Irrelevant, the wards will hold them outside, but we need to move faster than planned. Footsteps pounded down stone stairs. A door burst open with the shriek of tortured metal. And then Kieran was there, magnificent and terrifying in his fury. His ice-blue eyes blazing with alpha dominance. His hands still dripping blood from whatever he'd done to Morgana's guards upstairs. He saw Juliet chained in the center of the ritual circle, and went absolutely feral. The roar that tore from his throat made the walls shake, made the torches flicker, made even Morgana step back instinctively. Let her go. Each word was a command backed by every ounce of alpha power Kieran possessed. Now, or what? Morgana asked, recovering her composure. You'll kill me? Go ahead and try. But first, look up. 20 crossbows emerged from hidden alcoves in the walls, all aimed at Juliet's head. One word from Morgana, and they'd fire simultaneously. Even a werewolf couldn't survive that much silver to the brain. Kieran froze, his chest heaving, his entire body vibrating with barely controlled violence. "What do you want?" "Your cooperation." Morgana gestured to the metal cage suspended above Juliet. "Get in. Let my assistants chain you. Submit to the ritual, and I'll make her death quick. Painless. Fight me, and I'll make her suffer for hours while you watch." "Don't," Juliet shouted. "It's a trap, Kieran. She's going to drain your power and kill you anyway. Don't." One of the guards backhanded her, splitting her lip. Kieran snarled, lunging forward, but the crossbows tracked his movement. 20 fingers on 20 triggers. "Careful, Your Majesty," Morgana warned. "My people are very well trained. And very loyal. They won't hesitate." Juliet watched Kieran calculate odds, saw the moment he realized the terrible truth. He couldn't save her through violence. Couldn't fight his way out. Any aggressive move would get her killed instantly. "Why?" he asked, his voice raw. "Why her? She's nothing to you. She's everything to you. That makes her everything to me." Morgana's smile was vicious. "You killed my sister. Celeste died screaming because of you. So now you'll watch your mate die screaming because of me. Fair trade, don't you think?" Understanding dawned in Kieran's eyes. "Celeste was your sister. You're the one who planned Seraphina's assassination. Brilliant deduction." "Yes. I orchestrated it. Celeste was just the blade I wielded. And when you executed her for following my orders, you signed your own death warrant." Morgana moved to stand beside the cage. "Now get in, or I start removing pieces of your precious Luna. We'll begin with fingers, I think. See how many she has left when you finally comply." Juliet met Kieran's eyes across the chamber. Saw his anguish, his rage, his desperate search for a solution that didn't exist. The crossbows left no room for heroics. The silver chains left her unable to fight. And Morgana had planned for every contingency, every possible escape. They were trapped. Checkmate. "Don't do it," Juliet pleaded. "Please, Kieran. Don't let her win." But she already knew what he'd choose. Saw it in the way his shoulders slumped. In the way his hands unclenched. In the terrible defeat that washed over his features. He'd choose her life over his own, even if only for a few minutes more. Even if it meant giving Morgana exactly what she wanted. Because despite his walls, despite his warnings, despite the contract that said this was just business, he cared. Maybe not the soul-deep love he'd had for Seraphina, but enough. More than enough to sacrifice himself trying to save her. "I'll comply," Kieran said quietly. "Just, don't hurt her anymore." "Such a noble king," Morgana mocked. "So predictable in your heroism." She gestured, and her assistants moved to lower the cage. Kieran climbed inside without resistance, his eyes never leaving Juliet's face. They chained him with the same ancient silver that bound her wrists, ankles, throat, until he hung suspended 10 feet above her head like a grotesque marionette. The ritual circle began to glow, the blood symbols pulsed, and Morgana started chanting in a language that predated modern wolves, words that made Juliet's bones ache and her soul recoil. Dark magic filled the chamber like smoke, visible and writhing. It crawled up the chains toward Kieran, wrapping around him like serpents. He tensed, gritting his teeth as the first tendrils of power began to drain from him into the symbols below. "Stop," Juliet screamed. "Please, stop this." But Morgana just chanted louder, her voice rising with the magic's intensity. The symbols glowed brighter, the chains burned hotter, and Juliet watched, helpless, as Kieran's face went white with pain, as his magnificent power began hemorrhaging into a spell designed to steal everything he was. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her over the chanting. "I'm so sorry, Kieran. This is my fault. If I'd never—" His head lifted, his eyes silver now, glowing with wolf light, found hers. And despite the pain etched into every line of his face, despite the magic literally draining his life away, he mouthed 3 words. "Not your fault." Then his head dropped forward, and Juliet felt something crack inside her chest. Not the mate bond, they didn't have a real one. But something equally fundamental. The last barrier around her heart, the final wall she'd tried to maintain. She loved him, had loved him since the first moment, would love him until her last breath, and she was going to watch him die because she hadn't been strong enough, smart enough, fast enough to save him. Just like he'd watched Serafina die. The poetic cruelty of it made her want to scream. "Now for the final component," Morgana said, approaching Juliet with a ceremonial blade. "Your death will release the power trapped in the circle. Transfer it all to me. The Alpha King's strength, his territories, his throne, all mine. And he'll live just long enough to watch it happen, to know he failed again." She raised the knife. Juliet closed her eyes, thinking of Finn in Germany, of her parents who died never knowing what became of her, of Kieran hanging in chains above her and the love she'd never gotten to confess. But the killing blow never came. Instead, an explosion shook the chamber. The door imploded, and Derek's voice roared, "Get down!" The crossbow-wielding guards spun toward the new threat, their weapons firing wildly. Morgana cursed and lunged toward Juliet, blade raised. But before she could strike, a silver arrow shot from above, from the collapsed ceiling, took her in the shoulder, spinning her away. Chaos erupted. Derek and a dozen royal guards flooded the chamber, engaging Morgana's people with brutal efficiency. Dr. Navarro materialized, throwing some kind of powder at the ritual symbols that made them sputter and die. And from the ceiling breach, Vivian Ashford dropped down in full combat gear, landing with predatory grace. "About time," Kieran rasped from his cage. Vivian looked up at him, her expression fierce. "Had to wait for Navarro to break the outer wards. You're welcome, by the way." She pulled out bolt cutters and went to work on Juliet's chains. The false Luna better be worth all this trouble. The silver parted. Juliet collapsed forward, her wrists screaming, her wolf surging back with dizzy relief. Above her, Derek was cutting Kieran down, catching him as he fell. Across the chamber, Morgana fought like something possessed, dark magic exploding from her hands. She caught 2 guards with spells that dropped them screaming, threw another into a wall hard enough to crack stone. "The ritual was interrupted but not broken," Dr. Navarro shouted. "She's absorbed some of his power already. We need to contain her." Vivian snarled and shifted mid-leap, her wolf form massive and amber-eyed. She hit Morgana like a freight train, bearing her to the ground. They rolled, snarling and snapping. Vivian's wolf against Morgana's magic. Derek helped Kieran to his feet, though he swayed dangerously. "Your Majesty, you need to leave. You're too weak to." "No." Kieran's voice was rough but determined. He looked at Juliet, at the blood on her wrists, at the terror still lingering in her eyes. Something in his expression shifted from ice to fire, from control to raw fury. "No one threatens my mate and lives." The alpha dominance that rolled off him made everyone in the chamber freeze, friend and foe alike. Even weakened, even drained, Kieran Blackthorn was still the most powerful alpha in 3 territories. He stalked toward where Vivian and Morgana fought, each step steadier than the last. The dark magic that had been draining from him reversed suddenly, snapping back into his body like a rubber band released. Morgana screamed, trying to hold on to the stolen power. But Kieran was stronger. Even injured. Even betrayed, stronger. He grabbed Morgana by the throat, lifting her off the ground. Vivian shifted back to human form and stepped aside, recognizing the Alpha's right to finish this. "You wanted revenge for your sister?" Kieran asked, his voice deadly soft. "Here it is, the same justice she received." "You can't kill me," Morgana choked out. "The council will demand a trial, witnesses, proper. The council answers to me. And you just committed an act of war against the crown." His grip tightened. "Any last words?" Morgana smiled through her pain, blood on her teeth. "She'll never truly be yours. That false mate will leave, and you'll be alone again. That's my curse, Alpha King. True solitude, forever." Kieran's eyes flicked to Juliet for just a moment, then back to Morgana. "Wrong. She's already mine. Has been from the beginning. I was just too broken to admit it." He snapped her neck with one efficient twist. The body dropped. The remaining robed figures surrendered or fled. And in the sudden silence, Kieran finally allowed himself to collapse. Juliet was there to catch him. Chapter 7. The Dawn Revelation. They transported Kieran back to the estate in an armored convoy, Dr. Navarro monitoring his vital signs while Juliet held his hand and refused to let go. The ritual had drained more than just his power, it had carved into his life force itself. leaving him pale and shaking, his breathing shallow. "Will he be okay?" Juliet asked for the 10th time. "His wolf is strong. He'll heal." Dr. Navarro adjusted an IV line. "But it'll take time. Days, maybe weeks, before he's fully recovered. The kind of magic Morgana used. It leaves scars that go deeper than physical." Juliet thought about emotional scars, about trauma that reshaped you into someone new, about the walls people built to protect hearts that had been shattered. She squeezed Kieran's hand gently. His eyes fluttered open, silver-tinged and unfocused. "Juliet, I'm here," she whispered. "I'm safe. You saved me." "Wrong," he rasped. "You saved me. Again." His lips curved in the ghost of a smile. "Seems to be a pattern." "Rest," Dr. Navarro ordered. "You can flirt with your mate later, Your Majesty." Kieran's eyes drifted closed again, but his hand tightened around Juliet's. Holding on like letting go might make her disappear. At the estate, they carried him to the master suite, not the secure wing, Juliet noted, but their original quarters with the forest view he preferred. Eleanor had already prepared everything, fresh linens and medical supplies arranged with meticulous care. "I'll stay with him," Juliet said when the doctor suggested rest. "Luna, you're injured yourself. Those silver burns need treatment." "After." Juliet settled into the chair beside the bed, her hand still clasped in Kieran's. "I'm not leaving him." Dr. Navarro exchanged a look with Eleanor but didn't argue. She treated Juliet's wrists where she sat, applying salve that smelled like herbs and magic, wrapping them in soft bandages. Then she left instructions and departed, leaving Juliet alone with the unconscious Alphaking. Dawn light crept through the windows, painting everything gold and gentle. Juliet watched Kieran sleep, his face finally relaxed, the harsh lines of command softened by vulnerability. He looked younger like this, almost peaceful. She thought about what he'd said in that chamber, with Morgana at his mercy. "She's already mine," has been from the beginning. Had he meant it? Or was it just posturing? An alpha defending his territory against a threat. Juliet's heart wanted desperately to believe the former, but her mind, scarred by weeks of carefully maintained distance, warned against hope. "You're thinking too loud," Kieran murmured, eyes still closed. "I can practically hear your brain spinning." Juliet startled. "I thought you were asleep." "Was. Your anxiety woke me." He opened his eyes, clearer now than before, that familiar ice blue focused entirely on her. "What are you worrying about?" "Everything," she wanted to say. "You, us. What happens now? Whether you meant what you said, or whether we go back to pretending." "How you're feeling," she said instead. "Whether you're in pain." Liar. But his voice held no heat. "Ask me what you really want to know, Juliet." Her throat tightened. "Did you mean it? What you said to Morgana about me being yours?" Kieran was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "Do you remember the night after the border attack? When you patched me up and I told you about Serafina?" "Yes. I told you I wasn't capable of love anymore. That she'd taken the best parts of me when she died." He paused. "I believed that. Believed I'd used up my capacity for caring, that I'd never feel anything real again. That's why I created the contract, a way to have the appearance of a mate without the risk of actual connection." Juliet's heart hammered. "And now? Now I realize I'm an idiot." He finally looked at her fully, and the raw honesty in his expression stole her breath. "You broke through every wall I built, Juliet. Every defense, every carefully constructed barrier. At first I told myself it was just concern for your welfare, professional responsibility. But then you stayed up treating my wounds when you should have been resting, cried happy tears about your brother's treatment, fought with me about pushing people away, looked at me like I was worth saving even when I'd convinced myself I wasn't. Kieran, let me finish, please." His grip on her hand tightened. "When Vivian suggested you leave, when you came to me and said maybe ending the arrangement was best, I should have been relieved. Should have seen it as the logical conclusion to a business transaction. Instead, I felt like you'd carved out my chest. And in that moment, I understood. I'd fallen in love with you somewhere between the first assassination attempt and the last dance. Maybe earlier. Maybe the first night you refused to be intimidated by my walls. Tears blurred Juliet's vision. You said not to fall in love with you. I know, and you broke it anyway. His smile was crooked, self-deprecating. Just like you broke every other rule I tried to set. Thank God. You're not angry? Angry? He laughed, though it turned into a cough that made him wince. Juliet, I'm terrified. I'm damaged and scarred and so afraid of losing you the way I lost Serafina that I can barely think straight. But angry? No. I'm grateful. You saw past the Ice King act to whoever I actually am underneath, and you cared anyway. That's a gift I didn't think I'd ever receive again. Juliet's tears spilled over. I've loved you since before we met. 4 years ago, at the Northern Summit. You walked past me like I didn't exist, but something in me recognized you anyway. I thought I was crazy. Thought it was impossible. But when you offered me the contract, even knowing you'd forbidden real feelings, I couldn't say no. Because a year pretending to be yours was better than a lifetime never knowing you at all. Kieran sat up slowly, ignoring Dr. Navarro's instructions, and cupped Juliet's face in his hands. His thumbs brushed away her tears with infinite gentleness. 4 years, he breathed. You've been carrying this for 4 years? I'm sorry. I know I broke the rules. I know this isn't what you wanted. It's exactly what I wanted. I was just too much of a coward to admit it. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. I love you, Juliet Hale. Not as a contract obligation, or a political arrangement. Not as a replacement for what I lost. But as you stubborn, brave, impossibly kind you. And I know I'm broken and difficult, and probably the worst choice you could make. But if you'll have me, if you'll give me a chance to do this right. She kissed him. Couldn't help it, couldn't wait another second. Poured 4 years of longing and weeks of frustration and hours of terror into that kiss. He responded instantly, his hand fisting in her hair, his other arm pulling her closer despite his injuries. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kieran smiled a real smile, warm and unguarded, and so beautiful it made her heart ache. I'll take that as a yes, he murmured. Yes, Juliet confirmed, laughing through tears. Yes to everything. To you, to this, to whatever comes next. Even the parts where I'm overprotective and paranoid and make you crazy with security protocols. Even those parts. Especially those parts. She touched his face gently. Because they mean you care. And I'd rather have you caring too much than not at all. He kissed her again, softer this time, savoring. We should probably make this official. A real mating bond, not the fake mark Eleanor's enchantress created. Juliet's wolf perked up eagerly at the suggestion. Are you sure? You don't have to. I want to. Kieran's voice was absolutely certain. I want everyone in these territories to know you're mine and I'm yours. Want the bond that should have existed from the beginning. Unless, he hesitated. Unless you'd rather wait until I'm fully healed. Until we've had time to. Now, Juliet interrupted. I want it now. Before anything else can go wrong. Before any other threats emerge. I want to be bound to you so completely that nothing can break it. Heat flared in his eyes, desire mixed with something deeper, more primal. His wolf recognizing its mate, finally allowed to claim what it had wanted all along. Come here, he commanded softly. Juliet moved to the bed, settling beside him. Kieran guided her to straddle his lap, his hands on her waist, his gaze locked on hers with burning intensity. This will hurt, he warned. The claiming bite. But only for a moment. I know. She tilted her head, exposing her throat, the ultimate sign of trust between wolves. I'm not afraid. His hand came up to cup the back of her neck, his thumb brushing the pulse point there. I love you, he said again, like he needed to be absolutely certain she knew. This isn't the contract talking. This is me, choosing you, for real and forever. I love you too, Juliet whispered. Now bite me already before I lose my nerve. He laughed, and then his mouth was on her throat, kissing first, gentle and reverent. Then his teeth extended, and he bit down. The pain was sharp and bright, but it transformed almost instantly into something else. Pleasure, yes, but more than that. Connection. A golden thread spooling out from her chest to his, binding them together in a way that was soul-deep and permanent. She felt his wolf recognize hers, felt the mate bond snap into place with the inevitability of gravity, felt everything he was pour into her consciousness in a rush of emotion that made her gasp. Love, fierce and protective and slightly possessive. Fear of losing her, of failing her, of not being enough. Hope fragile but growing. That maybe this time he could have happiness. And beneath it all a bone-deep certainty. Mine. Forever mine. When he released her throat, Juliet could feel the mark settling into place. A real claiming bite this time, visible and permanent. She bit him in return, on the junction of his neck and shoulder, and felt his answering emotions flood through the new bond. Overwhelming relief, desperate love, and a possessiveness that matched her own. Ours, her wolf purred contentedly. Finally ours. They held each other as the bond settled, as their wolves circled and recognized and accepted. No contract could create this. No performance could fake it. This was real, the connection Juliet had dreamed about for 4 years and Kieran had thought he'd lost forever. I can feel you, Juliet whispered in wonder. Your emotions, your wolf, everything. I know. Kieran's voice was rough with emotion. It's overwhelming, perfect, terrifying, all of the above. She agreed, then hesitated. Can you feel Serafina's bond too? Is it strange having two? He shook his head gently. The bond with Serafina broke when she died. This is different. New. Completely ours. He pulled back to look at her. You're not her replacement, Juliet. You're not competing with a ghost. You're my second chance, and I promise to do better this time. To protect you without suffocating you. To love you without the fear destroying us. We'll figure it out together, Juliet said. Both of us, partners. Not king and subject, but equals. Equals, he agreed, and sealed it with a kiss that turned heated, desperate. His hands roamed her body with newfound freedom, now that the careful distance was shattered. Her fingers threaded through his hair, pulling him closer. They would have gone further, much further, but Dr. Navarro chose that moment to knock sharply on the door. Your Majesty, I'm coming in to check your vitals. Whether you like it or not, make yourself decent. Kieran groaned. Terrible timing, Lydia. Life-saving timing, the doctor corrected, sweeping in with professional briskness. She stopped short when she saw the fresh claiming marks on both their throats, then smiled. Well, I see you found an alternative healing method. The most effective one, Kieran said, not looking away from Juliet. Dr. Navarro ran her tests, proclaimed him healing faster than expected. Mate bonds will do that, and left with instructions to rest, eat, and try to keep the celebrations moderate for at least 24 hours. After she left, Juliet settled against Kieran's chest, his arms wrapped around her, the mate bond humming contentedly between them. What happens now? She asked quietly. With the contract, I mean. And the council. And everything. Now we tell the truth. Kieran's fingers traced idle patterns on her arm. The engagement was arranged, yes. But somewhere along the way, it became real. The council can accept it or challenge me. Either way, you're my mate and my Luna. That's not negotiable. Some of them won't like it. Vivian, Thaddeus. Vivian helped rescue us. I think we've earned her grudging respect, at least. He paused. And Thaddeus. Well, he's always going to be a problem. But that's why I have Derek in the Royal Guard. And now I have you, a Luna who's brave enough to stare down assassins and clever enough to see through political games. I don't know anything about being Luna, Juliet protested. Neither did Serafina when we bonded. Neither does anyone until they learn. He tilted her chin up. You've been learning for weeks, Juliet. Eleanor says you're a natural. Madame Rousseau thinks you have excellent diplomatic instincts. And I know you have the courage and heart this position requires. What about Finn? And the money? The money's yours as the contract stipulated. Use it for Finn's treatment, and once he's well enough, we'll bring him here if he wants. The estate has plenty of room. Kieran smiled. I'd like to meet the brother you've sacrificed so much for. Tears threatened again. You'd do that? Let him live here? Juliet, you're my mate. Your family is my family now. That's how this works. He kissed her forehead. though I draw the line at letting him call me Your Majesty. I'd prefer to be on first-name terms with my future brother-in-law. The image of Kieran, the terrifying Alphaking, insisting that Finn use his first name was so absurd and wonderful that Juliet laughed. He's going to be insufferable about this. His sister married a king. You haven't married me yet, Kieran pointed out. I should probably propose properly, without contracts and conditions and explicit instructions not to fall in love. You should, Juliet agreed, grinning. I expect romance. Flowers, maybe. A heartfelt speech. Demanding. But his eyes were warm. I'll work on it. Give me a few days to recover from nearly dying, and I'll plan something appropriately royal and romantic. They fell silent, content to simply hold each other. Through the bond, Juliet could feel Kieran's exhaustion pulling at him, but also his profound peace. For the first time since she'd met him, there was no ice in his emotions. Just warmth and love, and the quiet joy of having found something he'd thought was lost forever. Sleep, she murmured. I'll be here when you wake up. Promise, promise. No more running away, no more ending the arrangement. You're stuck with me now. Best fate I could imagine, he whispered. And finally let sleep claim him. Juliet stayed awake a while longer, watching dawn fully break over the forest, feeling the mate bond pulse gently between them. 4 years ago, she'd seen an Alphaking walk past her without noticing she existed. Today, she was bonded to him, loved by him, claimed in every way that mattered. The path between those moments had been twisted and painful and terrifying, but somehow, impossibly, it had led here, to this bed, this man, this bond that felt like coming home. Worth it, she thought. Every sacrifice, every tear, every moment of pretending worth it for this. Her wolf hummed agreement, finally at peace. Don't forget to subscribe. Epilogue. 1 month later. The throne room of the Blackthorn estate had been transformed for the occasion. White flowers, wolfsbane, and ironwood, growing together in impossible harmony, decorated every surface. Representatives from all the territories filled the space, dressed in formal attire, watching with varying degrees of approval as Juliet Hale prepared to become Luna Queen. She stood in an antechamber, studying herself in the mirror. The gown was stunning silver silk that caught the light like moonlight on water, with intricate embroidery along the bodice. The claiming mark on her throat was visible and proudly displayed, no longer hidden by enchantment or high collars. You look perfect, Eleanor said, making final adjustments. A true Luna. I'm terrified, Juliet admitted. All those wolves out there, judging whether I'm worthy. They already know you're worthy. You survived assassination attempts, endured dark magic, and helped bring down the Crimson Order. Any wolf who questions your strength is a fool. Some of them still will. Let them. Eleanor smiled. You have the king's heart, and the king's bite. That makes you Luna, regardless of anyone else's opinion. A knock sounded. Derek's voice. It's time, Luna. Juliet took a deep breath and stepped out. The antechamber opened directly into the throne room, and the assembled wolves rose as she appeared. The aisle stretched before her, lined with flowers and candles and watching eyes. At the end, on the dais where 2 thrones sat side by side, Kieran waited. He looked magnificent in formal robes that somehow made him seem even more powerful, even more regal. But when his eyes met hers, all Juliet saw was the man she loved, not the terrifying Alphaking, but Kieran, who had nightmares and walls and a heart he thought was too broken to love again. Through the bond she felt his emotions. Pride, love, possessiveness, and underneath it all, profound gratitude that she'd chosen him despite everything. Walk faster, he sent through the bond, impatient. I've waited long enough to make this official. Juliet bit back a smile and deliberately slowed her pace, drawing out his torture. His mental growl of frustration made her grin. You're going to pay for that later, he warned. Promise. The heat that flooded through the bond made her stumble slightly. Derek, walking beside her as escort, steadied her elbow. Try to make it to the altar without combusting, Luna, he murmured. His Majesty's making eyes at you like he wants to skip the ceremony entirely. Not helping, Juliet muttered, but she was smiling. Finally, she reached the dais. Derek presented her formally to the assembled court. Luna Juliet Hale, mate to Alphaking Kieran Blackthorn, tested by trial and proven worthy. The court repeated. Proven worthy. Kieran took her hand, pulling her up beside him. You're stunning, he murmured. Just for her. You're biased. Completely. He turned to face the court, keeping her hand clasped in his. Today, we formalize what my wolf has known since the moment we met. Juliet Hale is my mate, my Luna, my equal in all things. She will rule beside me, share my throne, and command the same respect and loyalty you show me. Any who question this will answer to me personally. The warning in his voice was clear. Around the room, wolves who might have objected wisely kept silent. The high priestess stepped forward to conduct the ceremony, an ancient ritual that predated modern pack politics. She bound their joined hands with silk, spoke words in the old language about bonds that transcended death and love that defied logic. Do you, Kieran Blackthorn, Alphaking of the Western Territories, accept Juliet Hale as your mate and Luna? I do, Kieran said clearly. In this life and all others. And do you, Juliet Hale, accept Kieran Blackthorn as your mate and king? Juliet thought about the contract she'd signed, about the conditions she'd broken, about the journey from fake arrangement to real love. I do, always. The high priestess unwound the silk. Then by the old laws and the new, I declare this bond witnessed and blessed. Rise, Luna Queen. The court erupted in howls, the traditional wolf acknowledgement of a new Luna. Even those who'd been skeptical joined in, unable to resist the primal pull of pack unity. Kieran pulled Juliet close and kissed her thoroughly, publicly claiming her in front of everyone who mattered. When they finally broke apart, he whispered against her lips, Mine. Yours, she agreed. Though I'm pretty sure that was not part of the traditional ceremony. I'm the king. I make my own traditions. He turned them to face the court. Tonight, we celebrate. Tomorrow, we rule. Together. The celebration lasted well into the night. Juliet danced with Kieran, with Derek, even with a surprisingly gracious Vivian who admitted grudgingly that you've proven yourself false, Luna. Welcome to the pack. Thaddeus Grayson attended but kept his distance, his expression sour. Whatever plots he might have been hatching had been disrupted by Juliet's obvious competence and Kieran's absolute devotion. For now at least he'd have to accept the new Luna Queen. Near midnight, Juliet found herself on the terrace, catching her breath. Kieran joined her moments later, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. Hiding from your own party, she teased. Hiding with you. He handed her a glass. There's a difference. They stood in comfortable silence, looking out at the forest beyond the estate. In the distance, wolves ran through the trees, guards on patrol, but also pack members simply enjoying the night. I got a message from Finn, Juliet said. His treatment is working. The doctors say if he keeps improving at this rate, he might be able to come home by spring. That's wonderful. Kieran pulled her against his side. And when he does, we'll make sure he has everything he needs. The best tutors, access to the royal libraries, whatever helps him thrive. You're going to spoil him. Absolutely. It's my privilege as the brother-in-law of a king. He paused. Did you tell him about us? About the arrangement becoming real? I told him I married my employer, and it's complicated. Juliet laughed. He's thrilled. Said he always knew I'd do something dramatic. Marrying a king does qualify as dramatic. Marrying you qualifies as dramatic. She turned in his arms. No regrets? About which part? Offering you the contract that started this whole mess? Falling in love with you despite explicitly forbidding it? Or claiming you so thoroughly that everyone in 3 territories knows you're mine? Any of it. Not a single regret. He cupped her face gently. Well, maybe one. I regret wasting weeks building walls when I could have been doing this. He kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. Through the bond, Juliet felt his love wrap around her like a blanket, warm, secure, permanent. When they broke apart, she stayed close, her forehead resting against his. What was Serafina like? She asked quietly. Really like, not just the sanitized version everyone tells. Kieran tensed slightly, but didn't pull away. Why do you want to know? Because she was important to you. Because understanding who you were with her helps me understand who you are now. Juliet touched his chest, right over his heart. I'm not afraid of her memory, Kieran. She made you capable of loving me. I'm grateful for that. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, she was fierce, brilliant, Had a terrible sense of humor, loved puns, the worse the better. She was braver than me in a lot of ways. More willing to be vulnerable, to admit when she was scared. His voice grew thick. I took that for granted. Thought we had forever. And when she died, I promised myself I'd never be that careless again. Never assumed tomorrow was guaranteed. And then I came along and made you risk it anyway. You made me want to risk it. That's the difference. He pulled back to look at her. Serafina taught me how to love. You taught me how to love again. Both are gifts I'll treasure forever. Juliet's eyes burned with tears. Thank you. For telling me. For letting her be part of our story instead of erasing her. She'll always be part of my story. But you're my future, Juliet. You're the queen who'll rule beside me, the mate who'll grow old with me, the woman who proved that broken things can heal if they're given enough time and love. We healed each other, Juliet corrected. You taught me that sacrifice can lead to happiness. That sometimes the scariest choices lead to the best destinations. Philosophical. Kieran smiled. The court is going to love their wise new Luna. The court is going to deal with their stubborn new Luna. Juliet countered. I have plans. The orphanages need better funding. The border territories need schools. And we need to root out any remaining Crimson Order sympathizers before they regroup. Already planning reforms on your first day. I knew I chose well. He kissed her forehead. But tonight, can we just be us? Not King and Luna, not rulers and reformers. Just Kieran and Juliet, enjoying a party and being absurdly in love? I think we can manage that. They returned to the celebration hand in hand, danced until dawn, fed each other cake while the court applauded, and when the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, they slipped away to their quarters, exhausted and happy and completely, perfectly together. In bed, wrapped in Kieran's arms with the mate bond humming contentedly between them, Juliet thought about the contract that had started everything, about the condition she'd broken, and the love she'd found by breaking it. Kieran? She whispered. Thank you. For the contract, the condition, all of it. For being broken enough to build walls, and desperate enough to pay someone to pretend. Because if you hadn't, I never would have gotten close enough to love you. He pulled her tighter. Thank you for breaking every rule I set, for seeing through the ice to whoever was underneath, for being brave enough to love me anyway. Always, Juliet promised. In this life, and all others. Always, he echoed, and kissed her as dawn broke fully over the kingdom they'd rule together. A kingdom won through sacrifice and trial, through blood and magic and impossible choices, but most importantly, a kingdom won through love. The kind that refused to give up, even when ordered. The kind that broke through walls and shattered contracts and proved that broken things could heal if given enough patience and care. The kind that transformed fake arrangements into real bonds, frozen hearts into beating ones, and strangers into mates destined to spend forever together. And if sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, Juliet thought about the contract with its impossible condition, never fall in love with me, she simply smiled. Because some rules were meant to be broken, especially the ones that tried to prevent the inevitable.